Alright, take two. Let me check. This is up and running. How we do? I just started up the other stream. I was playing copyright music in the background. I was like, well, that's rude straight away. Goodness me. I've got new lighting here. I think you could probably tell it looks kind of off at the moment. I might try and do something about that. Let me check this is up and running first of all. Yeah, alright, looks like we're live. Let me try and fix this lighting just a little bit. Obviously I don't know what I'm doing. Obviously I don't know what I'm doing with that. Looks good? Alright, maybe I'll leave it. You know what I've actually done? I've put little orange filters on my backlights there. They were just white light before, and it looked very... So I've changed it to orange, but yeah, it looks kind of weird right now. Maybe it's just different. I am getting a new camera in here soon, so I think that is gonna be a lot better with the lighting and stuff. I could close those curtains. It's a nice day though. I think I'll leave it. I think we can live with it, eh? Well, we got some good content today because I am going to go over some of the debates that I've done so far. And what I really want to do is make some notes for myself about what I could be doing better in debates. I feel pretty good about my debate performances overall so far, but I know there's definitely things that I could be doing better. A couple of things I've jotted down in this doc already are to use slides, which I've done about half of my debates, and I think frankly I think I'm quite good at doing slides, so I think that's often quite useful. And the other thing I've put is to interrupt more, or maybe to time each person, because I do feel that I got to have some way of dealing with the Gish Gallop that still kind of seems polite. Like, if you have someone on who's from LinkedIn, it feels weird to be like cutting them off and like interrupt. Do you know what I mean? People read that as rude or bad etiquette, but realistically, if you're limited to an hour and the other guy wants to talk 15 minutes, it's like we've got to actually home in on the main points. It's reassuring that is kind of jives with the general debate advice I had from Ask Yourself and stuff like that. Looking for my watch that I took off before I got in the bath just a little bit. Alright, I think I'll have to let that go. So we've had some good discourse on LinkedIn from a paper that Patrick Raceroff shared with me. I was talking about posting this at the end of last stream. It's a paper on nutrient density and bioavailability. He's doing well, Poe. You know, Patrick Raceroff, I don't know if he like streams much. He's at Foolproof Mastery as his he's on YouTube and stuff like that, and on Instagram. I don't know if he streams much or like talks about his life, professional life on stream, stuff like that. But I know he's relatively recently got a new job that he's quite pleased with. I won't say more than that in case I'm doxing any of his details or whatever, but yeah, no, he's doing well as far as I can tell. I would like to chat to him on stream again sometime. I was actually just messaging him about this post. He's texting me some criticisms of the other guy, of something, I think something that Todd Thurman said. It's quite like detailed critique. That's really helpful. I said I'm going to do some debate reviews this afternoon. I appreciate any feedback you have. He takes me like some quite specific feedback. That's cool. He's a nice bloke. He sent me something about Paul Saladino as well. Reminds me of a reel I made about Paul Saladino. Alright, well, that's good. We'll have a quick debate between you two. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a ton that we disagree on. The thing that we debated on Farmkind was, I think, kind of illuminating for both of us. I like to think. He's a very smart guy, so, you know. But he shared this study with me, and I told him this would be good. I told him this would be good fodder on LinkedIn, and indeed, discourse has ensued. 105 reacts, 74 comments, and 7 reposts on this. I just posted this yesterday. On a Saturday, no less. And now the discourse is spilling into Easter Sunday. Plant-based meat is more nutrient-dense than animal meat. We have known for some time that eating plant-based meat leads to improved health versus meat from animals, with multiple RCTs showing significant reductions in LDL cholesterol, TMAOs, and body weight. The pro-meat people appear to have conceded on the actual health impacts and retreated to saying that meat wins on bioavailability and nutrient density, but now it looks like they're losing on that too. New RCT published in Clinical Nutrition found that plant-based meats, including Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, The Vegetarian Butcher, and Omnifoods, scored higher than meat on the Nutrient-Rich Food Index across every single category tested. Plant-based meats even won on bioavailability of B12. Despite both plant-based meat and the animal meat group consuming similar amounts of B12 in their diet, the fortified B12 in plant-based meat was actually more bioavailable than the B12 in animal meat. For what it's worth, I think that nutrient density and bioavailability are less important than actual health outcomes, which are consistently better for plant-based diets. But if the meat is more nutritious crowd want to play this game, they should know that they're losing here too. And we've got a graph we created from the paper. The reason I made this is because the original graph in the paper has a really very great paper, but the key on this graph, you actually can't tell the difference between the two squares, so it's not clear what I say. So I've recreated it here and shared this. This is the NRF 9.3, which is Nutrient-Rich Foods Index based on 9 positive nutrients. You get points for having more of these, minus essentially 3 negative nutrients where you lose points for having more of these. So it assesses 12 nutrients, and the paper actually assesses more than that as well. I don't think B12 is part of NRF 9.3, but they do have a few other things on top of that. But there's quite a bit of good discourse on this. It'd be funny if you debated someone typing in your channel's YouTube stream chat and then did a debate review of the stream. Yeah, maybe, Rebecca. That does happen. That does happen. I do like to argue with chat sometimes, as you know. As a noted chat arguer, Rebecca, you might be implicated in some of these debate reacts. Actually, you know what? Let's do a poll, because I want to get your guys' take on which debate I should review. Which debate should we So the recent ones, Roger Yates on Vegan 2.0. And bear in mind, I think I can probably only fit one of these, maybe two. I'll do a decently long stream today, but the debates are like all over an hour, so... So Roger Yates on Vegan 2.0, Todd Thurman on Cognition and Health, Sky Morgan, Skyjack Morgan, no less. Incrementalism. And then should we reach back for some older ones as well? I would be up for that. Matt Acton, that's memes, I guess. Oh, it looks like maybe I can only do 4 in the... Alright, well let's do these 4 as the 4 most recent. It's important to point out right away that nutrient density by weight is a terrible metric because it measures fibre as bad. Does it really? Nutrient density per calorie is far better measure. Oh, I see what you mean. Like if some, I see what you're saying in def. Yeah, if you take fibre to add to the weight, but not to the nutrient score. So I've been looking into this a little bit. There's different nutrient scores as well. So this NRF 9.3 is one of these, and it's quite widely used. It's quite, it's not like a controversial plant-based only measure. It was actually had funding from the dairy industry, interestingly, which I read when I was reading about this paper. So we got the hat tip Patrick Razoroff in the comments. Oh, it's pretty even split in the poll. We got 1 vote for each and then 2 for Roger Yates so far. Not bad, not bad. You know what? I've got the info up from the previous stream. Okay, nice. My thing was showing that there's 3 people in here, and I was like, well, there's 5 people voted in the poll already. Alright, looks like Roger Yates is inching ahead. Oh no, Skyjack Morgan in the lead. Skyjack Morgan on the lead with 43% so far. Hotting up. I think I'll let that run for a little while. The poll I did the other day timed itself out after some amount of time. And actually, I'm pleased to have you guys in chat to give me some feedback on these, because I'll tell you actually 2 things about my debates that I've done so far. One is, apart from Paul Wood, I think that's the only one that I have watched back, like at all. I haven't gone and sat through any of my other debates, only Control F the transcripts for the purpose of making clips. But I haven't like watched them all through or done an assessment of any of them except for Paul Wood, where I did it a bit on my own and I did it a bit on stream with Ask Yourself as well. So I haven't watched any of them back. And another thing to know as well, I do not look at chat really at all during the debates. So you guys may well have been saying stuff to me actually during the debates, but it's too much for me to be looking at chat, and so I've missed any valuable advice that will have come through that route. So there's a couple of notable responses anyway to this post about the improved nutrient density scores for plant-based meat alternatives, and also the increased bioavailability for B12, and there's a couple of other things as well, folate and selenium. They came out better in blood tests that they also did as part of this study. But there's a couple of interesting comments on here. This person seems to be a pro-meat commenter. Carleen Stark comments on a lot of these kind of posts. She's calling herself a nutrition and protein scientist, as she says a PhD. She seems to know what she's talking about to a decent extent, I will say that. And this thread is kind of interesting because I would call it like a Malte Rubach style in a way. I don't know if this is just the way I'm seeing these things, and obviously everyone has their own perspective on what's going on. But what I mean by that is sort of in the tone of disagreeing, but actually not really disagreeing with any of the substantive bits, kind of as if giving some context which negates the main finding or message, but actually not, kind of just talking about something else. And I'd be interested to know how much people posting things on the other side would relate to this as well. Or like think that I'm doing this when I'm commenting on their posts, say. But she says, this is an interesting paper, thanks for sharing. I agree that the data shows that plant-based meat alternatives are more nutrient dense than animal products, at least according to the NRF 9.3. So actually, already first sentence is like, I basically agree with the main thing that the study is pertaining to show. So that's good, fair. I mean, nice to put that front. Granted, of the 16 nutrients assessed, 12 of these provide at higher levels in the PB diet versus the AB diet. Okay, so again, it's like, 75% the plant-based was outperforming the animal-based. Also, statistically significant differences in nutrient status for B12, folate, and selenium. So again, this is all like granting the positive things about the study, saying the parts that she agrees with. Tastes like the first bite of a shit sandwich when someone's giving you all the good news. Now you can smell the disagreement coming. To me, these findings suggest that when fortified, plant-based diets can support the status of two nutrients of concern, B12 and selenium. Folate is a non-event, as plants are generally higher in folate than animal foods overall. So I can somewhat see what she's saying with folate there, like it's not a surprising finding. But that's kind of dismissive for something that is a main benefit of a plant-based diet. Like, oh, the plant-based diet had higher fiber. Well, that's not exactly surprising, because plant-based diets do tend to have higher fiber. It's like, right then. That's good though, right? Like, I don't know, it's just... It's not wrong, but it's kind of framed as if it's sharper criticism than it really is. Or like, I think it's downplaying basically one of the three findings, but whatever. There's no huge deal. The most interesting takeaway from this research, however, is that despite there being higher provision of 12 nutrients, only 3 of these translate into improved nutritional status, indicating that provision is not equivalent to bioavailability. Again, technically correct, but a little bit tricky. Because she's not saying that the 9 were worse for the plant-based meat group. So, plant-based meat was clearly winning or had higher provision on these particular 3 mentioned. And then it's like a wash on the other 9. I don't think there's victories within the nutrients measured here on the meat side. There could be some, but obviously overall on average these are the nutrient scores. And but it should be noted, by the way, these are not particularly close either, right? Like this is probably about 20-25% higher. This is like relative to this, it's like 25% higher again. This is probably like 30% higher relative to this. This is like more than double. This is like 5x maybe, and this is like almost double. So it's really not a close run thing for a lot of these categories. Some of these are like 50 percentage points. Like, that's mental. So, like, a resounding victory for the nutrient profile, the nutrient density scores for plant-based meat alternatives. And then we've got the points about B12 bioavailability is the other thing that I've mentioned here. Mind you, this is all framed in terms of the thing I'm always saying, that these nutrient density and bioavailability things are mechanistic on the way to health outcomes and health markers that we might care about. And, you know, the evidence on those things are already in favour of plant-based meat, as I mentioned in this post. This is maybe my favourite comment that somebody put on here. Oh, so I've replied, okay. I do my reply. Thanks for your comment. I said, I appreciate acknowledging the plant-based diet outperformed the animal diet on the nutrients measured. Good. I'm sure you know that NRF 9.3 is one of the most widely validated nutrient profiling systems and wasn't designed to favour plant-based foods. It was actually developed with funding from the dairy industry. The study included healthy participants and wasn't designed to investigate nutrient deficiencies. Did I finish reading her thing? No, I didn't even finish reading her thing. All right. So, all right, slow down, cowboy. It's also worth noting that none of the micronutrients in Table 4 of the paper were outside the normal range. Other findings clinically meaningful. So this is kind of bringing up a criticism of the study that this isn't. Like, this was done in healthy people, so they weren't recruiting people like deficient in B12 to try and see if this would cure deficiencies. I think that's probably like the mindset that you are trained in nutrition a lot of the time. Like, you're thinking of things in terms of deficiencies, which is fine. That's not bad. But it just wasn't what's trying to be measured here. Like, it's not actually a criticism that none of the scores are outside the normal range, right? You can still observe differences within that. Overall, shares in healthy adults, 8 weeks of plant-based meat alternatives does not negatively impact micronutrient status and may modestly increase folate, B12, and selenium. So again, I think this is like a very... It's like the most conservative framing possible of the findings. And honestly, it still sounds pretty positive. It's like someone's coming in to try and deflate the positive findings of this study, which are overwhelmingly favouring plant-based meat alternatives, and does the analysis, goes and looks at the paper, does some sort of criticisms, and really, like, the most conservatively framed version that she can give of the findings is to try and downplay the advantages for plant-based meat alternatives. Still sounds pretty decent for plant-based meat alternatives in my view. Now, I think this is too conservative still. For something that the meat industry's health narrative has been leaning so heavily on, I have heard it said by so many pro-meat people, you can't just look at the macronutrients, you're going to be missing out on valuable micronutrients. And the most conservative expression of the finding that this person can give is that it doesn't negatively impact micronutrient status. That's like a big concession if you're running the meat industry's health playbook. Hey Tristan, how's it going? Nice to see you. The poll's hotting up. We've got Skyjack Morgan on 40% versus 20 for everything else. Looks like it's going to be a Skyjack Morgan debate review. I won't close it yet. You can still vote if you haven't. I guess it closes automatically at some point. I can't see when, but I'll read through this first, so you know you've time to defect if that's what you want to do. So comment overall is trying to sort of deflate and downplay the findings, and I think still comes across with a pretty positive expression, and it's, you know, the limit of the attempt to do that, basically. Appreciate acknowledging this is a widely used validated thing developed by the dairy industry. This study included healthy participants and wasn't designed to investigate nutrient deficiencies. That said, the B12 finding is notable here. The PBMA group had significantly higher plasma B12. That is a direct comparison of bioavailability and the fortified form 1. For populations at risk of B12 deficiency, that could indeed be clinically meaningful. Had I been more pointed here, or more to the point, like just more on it with commenting, because then I kind of missed a bunch of this. Or I just went to bed, I guess. So, yeah, I should have asked, though, based on what you can see from this study, if you were talking to someone with B12 deficiency and you have the option of advising them to make up that part of their diet with meat or with plant-based meat alternatives, what would you recommend? Or based on, you know, other studies, if there are other studies on this topic, you would, for me, this is a 8-week randomized control trial where you have very tightly controlled people eating this thing or that thing, and then you have blood tests of the nutrients in their blood. Like, this is a pretty tight experimental study. You don't always have that much experimental control or that level of, like, actually measuring people's blood, as opposed to kind of self-reported health outcomes, or, right, these guys love to complain about epidemiology, so you don't always have that. You do have it here. It's pretty tight. Blood sample result based on an RCT. There may be evidence on the other side showing that meat products outperform fortified B12 in plant-based meat alternatives, but that would need to be presented. Like, I haven't seen that. So this is a pretty novel finding, pretty special finding for plant-based meat companies, frankly. Like, the meat industry has just lost quite a big talking point on micronutrition for meat versus plant-based alternatives. This criticism coming in is ultimately saying 8 weeks of plant-based meat alternatives not negatively impact micronutrient status, and then even may modestly increase folate, B12, and selenium. Like, there was a statistically significant increase in the plant-based meat group compared to the animal meat group on B12. So you can kind of, you know, express this in a downplayed way, but realistically, I said, I think your summary is downplaying the findings somewhat, but still reads pretty positively for PBMAs, yeah. In a direct experimental comparison with meat, PBMAs significantly improved B12, folate, and selenium with no adverse effects on other biomarkers. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty compelling, isn't it? Now, this is my favourite comment on the thread. This guy calling himself an author, speaker, and coach comments, Colin Stark, glad you got to him first. I wouldn't have been so nice. This is LinkedIn, by the way. This is LinkedIn, by the way. This is not like a no-name Twitter account. I wouldn't have been so fucking nice if I'd got to him first. I didn't comment again last night, and he does a bit back and forth with the woman, and I said this morning, glad you got to him first, I wouldn't have been so nice. What are you going to do? Coach me? Like, who talks like this, honestly? We've got some more from this. I don't think I've commented again on this thread other than on this guy. Do you read LinkedIn, lunatic? Oh, no, I don't, but I bloody should. I wouldn't be surprised if I'd been posted on there. I do like a scuffle on LinkedIn. Why are you wasting time reviewing this stuff when we could all be refusing to go through airport scanners? True, Andrew. Damn, looks like SJM is mogging the other options here. Roger Yates in a distant second with 21%. Todd Thurman and Matt Acton with just 14% each. So we're definitely leaning towards the intra-veganism debates over the meathead debates. Interesting. I think there'll be useful things to be learned from all of them. Skyjack Morgan's definitely probably the most entertaining, realistically, right? He's like a content creator, and he, you know, he was good at talking. He knows how to throw a lot of stuff out that's going to be good content, basically. So yeah, fair play to you. Fair play to you. It's a reasonable vote. So the other main criticism we got here was from our friend Mr. Expert. This Malte Rubach back again. Malte Rubach again, they should call him. He says, this post overstates what the RCT actually shows, doesn't it? Oh, by the way, in the intervening time here, I've had quite an interesting exchange with David Rams on this study, who asked ChatGPT for a measured response as to whether this post was overstating this study. And interestingly, ChatGPT couldn't access the paper because it's paywalled or PDF or whatever, so it couldn't access the actual paper. But it replied based on, as far as I can tell, just the abstract, which is posted in a couple of places. Or possibly, no, I don't think it's even a press release. I think it's just the abstract. And based on only being able to read the abstract, ChatGPT is like, oh, this is overclaiming because there's nothing in here about bioavailability of B12. I'm like, there is, but it's just I can't see the full paper. Anyway, I bring that up because, and I see I have another message from DRAMS on that, which I'll read later, I guess. Based on that, I bring that up because we know that Malte Rubach is fond of a ChatGPT comment. He has admitted to copy-pasting his comments from ChatGPT, which is probably one of the major reasons that he won't debate. Like, if you don't actually have a good understanding of this stuff, such that you could talk about it live and, respond to questions in a meaningful way and make an argument overall with respect to the actual point being discussed, and really your interaction is just copying something into ChatGPT and then copying back some ChatGPT criticism. Like, I feel like there's tinges of that in Malte Rubach's comment here, and as we know, he does do this. So if that's how your interaction with these things are, you probably don't really want to take a live debate on them, right? So he says, this post overstates what the RCT actually shows, doesn't it? Doesn't it? The study is an 8-week secondary analysis, not powered for micronutrients, with a small sample and no participant blinding. Many outcomes rely on self-reported diet and surrogate biomarkers, not clinical endpoints. So this is their favourite thing about RCTs are not long enough. As we know, these guys have all the criticisms of epidemiology and can tell you why there's confounders and healthy user bias and so on. And then also will, with the 1-2 punch, say, also, RCTs don't count if they're only short-term and don't have clinical endpoints. I can tell you have the RCT that assigns people to diets and then follows them until they die of heart disease. You can't say that any of this is causal. Like, okay. Then this is just stupid. No participant blinding. Many outcomes rely on self-reported diet. So the people in this study are given their food that they're to eat. I think they have it frozen. They're given like either a load of frozen meat or a load of frozen plant-based meat. Then they eat that, and then they have, again, blood tests to actually compare biomarkers. So if I say self-reported diet, people are assigned to random groups here and given all the food to eat. Okay, the research team don't follow them and watch them eat every meal, but they're like, this is a lot more reliable than anything you're going to get for self-reported diet. Did you eat, all that food that we gave you and told you to eat that? Have you eaten that broadly? Yeah, I have eaten that broadly, yeah. Well, okay then, right. As opposed to, I've taken part in studies where it's like, write down everything that you have on 3 non-consecutive days of the week and stuff like this. Like I can see how that is a bit of a pain for participants to do. But this wasn't that. This is, you're given a bunch of food, you're told to eat it, you confirm that that's happened, right? They're assigned and given their food, so it's not self-reported diet. I think is really underselling what's happening there. Net participant blinding, like, why does that matter if you're using blood samples? That would be an objection that you could have if people were self-reporting the actual outcomes, which it seems to be like what ChatGPT was thinking about saying in this case. But it says many outcomes, it won't say self-reported, rely on self-reported diet. Like, that's not really true anyway. And then participant blinding, that would only matter if you were having some sort of subjectivity in the data that you're getting from them. Obviously, if you give some people meat products and some others plant-based meat products, like in most of these studies, people are able to tell the difference. Now, that's not what this study's about. But yeah, you're not going to be able to basically do participant blinding in these kind of studies. But it doesn't matter because they're taking blood samples as the data source here. So there's like 3 different things wrong in this first point. Then he says, the higher nutrient density is largely an artifact of fortification and the NRF index, which directly rewards added vitamins and minerals. That says little about real-world nutritional quality or long-term adequacy. It could be easy to fortify animal-based meat products too and win the battle. Alright, we'll do that then. Like, fine, but do that then. And why is this written as if to suggest that there's some sort of problem with fortification or added vitamins and minerals? This is an artifact of fortification, and the index structurally rewards added vitamin. It's like, okay, and you're allowed to fortify things. You're allowed to have added vitamins and minerals. This is not that that somehow doesn't count. Right? And again, these people like to say, oh, well, there's nothing about real-world nutritional quality, because this is based on, well, it's going to be less bioavailable if it's coming from fortification. But that's, again, this study has showed that that's not the case for B12. The fortified B12 actually led to higher B12 in the blood compared to the B12 coming from the animal products. So, again, this seems like a kind of confused and or deliberately misleading criticism. It's like pointing towards the idea that there's some sort of fortification problem, some sort of added vitamins and minerals problem. But it doesn't actually say that. Could be easy to fortify animal meat products too and win the battle. Okay, well do that then. And as we know, B12 is fed to livestock. So if they're actually already doing this, they're already fortifying, and they're still losing. So, I don't know, what do you want me to say to that? Number 3, even the biomarker results are selective. Only B12, folate, and selenium show statistically significant differences, while key markers like iron status, calcium, zinc, and burn turnover showed no effect despite higher intake. Okay, so again, this kind of phrased as if this is a negative result for plant-based meat, showed no effect, like no difference, right? No disadvantage on all of these things that these pro-meat people have been saying are the big micronutrient advantages for meat. there wasn't any disadvantages for the plant-based meat group for iron, calcium, zinc, burn turnover, really none of them. So this is like phrased as if it's a defensive meat, but is conceding all of the micronutrient advantages that meat producers presumed that they have and have been kind of implying that they have. The biomarker results are selective. B12, who cares about B12 with respect to plant-based versus animal products? We never talk about that. It's like, what? Claims on bioavailability, EGB. I like how it puts in quote marks. Bioavailability, EGB12, based on short-term serum changes, not functional markers or long-term status. Again, with a long-term. Pardon me. Again, with the long-term. Like, it seems to me pretty unlikely that if you actually see a significant increase in B12 in the blood in just an 8-week trial where people are eating these foods or those, if anything, you would be thinking that may not be long enough to see if there is some sort of difference here. But if you actually do see an increase in that amount of time, it seems to me unlikely that it would go back the other way in the long term. Like, I just don't see any argument why that would be the case, and I don't think there's been evidence presented for that. Importantly, the plant-based group had substantially higher sodium intake and adverse signal that is largely ignored. Do you know what? This point 4 was, I think, the only one of these 4 criticisms that really was something approaching like an actual point for the other side. All of this other stuff, and like, it's bad to be having too much salt, right? Obviously. Now, it doesn't say they're above the salt limit or like that it's a dangerous amount of salt to be having or anything like that. But there was more salts consumed in the plant-based meat compared to the animal meat group. All of this other stuff is like attempts at deflating the main findings of the study, but pretty weak attempts, really. Like, this is only a short thing, no participant blinding, doesn't really matter if you've got blood samples. Everyone has self-reported diet for people who are given the food to eat, told them. Not clinical endpoints, right? This is the length of study thing, which again is brought up here. I think that in an 8-week study, if you're seeing significant differences in these things, if anything, there's a stronger argument that there is a difference here to be observed, to be discussed, to be considered. And then there's a largely artifact of fortification and added vitamins and minerals. Like, okay, there's no problem with that. You're allowed to do that. So I think the Sol is the only thing that's really like approaching legitimate criticism, and I don't think that it's presented as if, or like, if there was a problematically high sodium intake in the plant-based group, this guy would for sure be saying that. He's just said that it's increased. So I actually had double comment. He got me good. I had to reply, of course. And then he hasn't replied again. So I think he has just kind of is doing just sling a lot of shit and then peace out. Partly because I've said in my reply, if you want to, I'd love to have a live discussion with you about it, but something tells me that you'll decline. Now, long-term viewers will know that this guy's been running from debate for a while here. So I don't think that we're going to be having Mr. Expert on the stream anytime soon, sadly. But I said, what's wrong with fortification? If you can have fortified products that lead to superior nutrition, what's the problem? In this case, we see B12 fortification leading to higher serum than B12 than meat. Would you rather less nutrition from the unfortified product? And then I've replied to each of these 4. I said, actually, such weak criticisms. I've kind of replied to these already as I was reading through them, so I won't. I might not bother reading through these again. Or maybe I will. Let's do them quick. So, number one is weak to say the diet was self-reported for a study where they were literally given the food to eat. You know that participant blinding is not possible here, but that would only matter if outcomes were self-reported, which they weren't. I think I replied to like 2 out of 3 of the things that I said above. Number 2, what's the problem with falsification in added vitamins and minerals? Any evidence that doesn't map onto real-world nutritional quality, whatever that means. It seems you're implying that fortified vitamins and minerals somehow don't count without any evidence or arguments for that. Number 3, you're just pointing out that only some biomarkers were improved rather than every single one of them. That's so weak. Even then, you're just saying the others had no difference, not that meat was actually better for any of them. Number 4, finally something resembling an actual criticism of plant-based meat alternatives. I think this is outweighed by all the clear nutritional advantages of plant-based meat alternatives demonstrated here and in other studies mentioned. The evidence for health and nutritional advantages of plant-based meat alternatives over meat gets stronger all the time, despite Malte copy-pasting ChatGPT critiques. No further responses from Malte on this one. We might get some, who knows. Someone else comes on and says, by all means, I'm no expert, but are you claiming that a food fortified with B12 is metabolically processed the same way as food with a natural source of B12, albeit be of a less of a quantity of B12? I said, no, I'm saying it's better. Like, these guys are very ready with the... Are you claiming that this is metabolically processed the same? Like, nope, I haven't said anything about metabolically processing. It's higher in the blood, right? So if you want to make some sort of inference about how it's metabolically processed, that would be accounting for why the fortified form is actually higher in the blood samples. This guy, I mean, a lot of these comments are just stupid, like kind of too stupid to read. Like sometimes the funny ones are. This guy's a regenerative rancher and food systems rebel. Well, that's... Who paid for the study? You've got some great points for sure. The whole fortification thing is hilarious. Apples and oranges if you're allowed to fortify to beat Mother Nature. I read this morning when I woke up and I took a moment thinking about it, like, why is this stupid? And I thought, oh yeah, you are allowed to fortify. What do you mean if you're allowed to fortify? Like, you are allowed to fortify. You're literally allowed to do that. There's no one stop you. It's a legal thing that you can do. Yes, you may fortify. Go forth and fortify. So I said you are allowed to fortify to beat Mother Nature. You're also allowed to use antibiotics, air conditioning, and the internet. You're making a fallacious appeal to nature. Look it up. This guy's just for fun. He says, fart-based vegan diets are never superior to bioavailable meat. Again, I had to take a minute when I read this. I said, most intellectual meat advocate, which truly. It says, and you are an animal advocate, so you want to feed us plant-based garbage made of chemicals. Bit pedantic, but I couldn't help myself. I said, everything's made of chemicals, genius. And he says, please continue eating fart-based vegan diets and fake meats. I'm like, thanks, I will, I guess. I said, good case study for my hypothesis about carnivores and IQ. This guy almost told Thurman in that. We've got Matt Acton popping up a couple times here. Just talking about this was funded by Pinduoduo, a Chinese e-commerce giant. This company sells meat. I don't know what to tell you. They seem to be a supermarket, or I guess, or as an e-commerce giant. Okay, but they deliver food. They sell animal products. Like, I don't know. I don't think this is introducing some sort of bias, this particular funding source. But it's also like the very level one thing to look for. Like, if you can't really be bothered or are not capable of reading a methods section, or possibly accessing the study, to be fair, right? It's very paywalled. But what you can see, I think you can still see on the page where you can only see the abstract and you haven't like done an institutional login or whatever. I'm pretty sure you can still see the bit where it says funding source, and that's like just such a level 1 easy thing to go and read and understand. Oh, it's funded by X company. And then if there's like some sort of loose reason why that might be biased, it's like, well, we're throwing the whole thing out then. They own Temu? Oh, is that so? Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's not like a plant-based meat company, right? Who would have loved to go and find that, oh, this study's funded by Beyond Meat. No, it wasn't. So it seems like a pretty neutral funder with respect to these particular outcomes. I just had a look at what they said. I said, this company sells meat. And they do also sell plant-based meat, I guess. But I don't see any reason to think that they're favouring one over the other. Any criticism of the actual methods? He said, is no more and no less valid as a study showing the inverse conclusion, animal diet is better than plant-based meat alternatives, that is funded by the American Cattlemen's Association. Again, like, funding is the thing to criticise if you're not capable of criticising anything else, basically. A study having a suspect source of funding can certainly be a signal that it's worth going and looking into that study and looking a bit more closely at the methodological decisions made in the analysis and stuff like this, right? But it's not by itself disqualifying. Things can be funded by plant-based meat companies or by the meat industry and still be correct. Now, does it bear looking at the methods when you see that this is funded by somebody with an interest in one particular outcome? Of course it does. But you have to actually do that and say, this is the source of bias here, this is what's going wrong, rather than just saying, this has a biased source of funding. That's not enough by itself. That feels, to me, that feels kind of obvious, but... Anyway, I said if you could provide such a study, we could talk about the methods. But I certainly wouldn't do, what I certainly wouldn't do is say that it's wrong just because of the funding source. So no replies yet on that. And I'm not going to go through all of the, oh look, we've got David Ram's reply here. Nice evidence that sits near the top of the hierarchy, evidence of hierarchy, Chris, but you're lying and misleading people because I don't like what it says. Basically every comment here trying to argue with you. True, D-Rams. We got another couple of based vegan commenters on here, or, you know, objective understanders of studies. I'm not going to read through all these, but there's a lot of triggered meatheads in here, suffice to say. We got someone doing the evolution bit here. There's a 350,000-year-old study that refutes this. It's called Human Evolution. So smug and so wrong. Hey, ever heard of evolution? Look it up, punk. Huh. Ever heard of this study? Evolution. Come on. I thought that this was the most compelling thing I had refuted this with in the Matt Acton debate. Said, in our evolutionary history we had to avoid starvation. Today we have to avoid heart disease and cancer. If you don't want to acknowledge that change, that's up to you. I think that's a pretty nice response to the evolution, though. As far as I can tell, that's doing most of the work there. We got 16 votes in on the poll, by the way. Skyjack Morgan winning on 50%. Roger Yates getting closer, but still quite a distant second on 25%. And then 12% each for Matt Acton and Todd Thurman. So it's looking like it's going to be Skyjack Morgan. Is Rams ever going to be on Sentientism? That's a good question. Yeah, Jamie should get him on. Jamie Woodhouse from Sentientism's coming on the channel in a couple of weeks' time. True, and Death Coachception. Be great if the study takes away the nutrient density, though. Argument, nutrient density is such a useless metric in a world of supermarkets. Yeah, that's so true, Stiska. That's so true. I mean, as I say in the post, I think that nutrient density and bioavailability are like secondary considerations in any case, but it's just nice to be able to now cite something that actually is a win for plant-based meats on those points, as well as saying, by the way, this is less important than the overall health outcome, right? Yeah, that's so true in Defamon, the miracles of veganism getting Christian conservatives to invoke evolution. Yeah. Todd Thurman's voice is too boring, I can't really listen, sorry. Yeah, that guy had a bit of a strategy to just be fucking boring to watch. I don't know, he looked so depressed when I first came on the call. I guess that's what you look like if you spend decades sharpening the pig killing machine. He had asked not to discuss anything like ethics, which I thought I'll honour because I kind of have to not be someone that no one wants to come and have a conversation with. Like, I don't want to violate conditional rules that I've agreed to. But yeah, that was kind of telling. He didn't even want to discuss that. But yeah, there's a lot of copium on this post. Ian Storer, that's another beauty. We're truly in the 1984 timeline. War is peace, etc. Storer leaned back and stroked his beard, satisfied with his day's LinkedIn commenting. Oh, brother. A lot of people, like, really with no argument at all. Like, this 1984, keep trying, someone says. Any actual disagreement, I said. Sure, someone says. No argument, I said. Like, it's spray with doubt to whatever level of ability you have. If all you can do is point out the funding, go point out the funding and draw some spurious connections. If you think that you can make a more sophisticated critique of the methods, or at least ask ChatGPT to do that. In fact, just Malta ask ChatGPT to do that and then post that. Never mind if a lot of the criticisms don't really make sense. Just post something off ChatGPT and then people, our side will come in and get behind it. At best, I mean, I think Carlin Stark's the fairest and, like, indeed concedes that this is a pretty good outcome for plant-based meat overall. In many ways, I think the most compelling response is this one. Fart-based vegan diets are never superior to bioavailable meat. I think that's pretty much what we expect at the limit of the bell curve with respect to these pro-meat people. Someone else just said more nutrient-dense than animal meat is a wild take. Can at least see the arguments surrounding cholesterol. Highly disagree. Oh, what a surprise. Wonder what he thinks. Wonder if he's got anything to say about lean mass hyperresponders. Like, it all comes from the same bullshit claims. It's absolutely not more nutrient-dense than quality animal-based meat / protein. I mean, you're just ignoring the study then? Are we? We're just going to ignore that? Head of Spoken Nutrition. Yeah, maybe not so good on the written stuff. What does that mean? Another ChatGPT criticism. Your post hook is a good one, yet even you admitted before the second statement in this post is not logically or scientifically valid. Makes it hard to trust the rest of what you're writing here when you violate your own rule about correlation equal causation. Which, I'm talking about RCTs here. I referenced some other RCTs, and then the main thing I'm talking about is an RCT. I say I'm talking about RCTs here. This has nothing to do with the correlation causation thing. Like, this has really not come from a understanding at all of the post. The second statement, he's talking about this, which again, I'm talking about RCTs. I don't know why bring up correlation causation would be at all relevant here. So anyway, this was a good fun post, and I said I've got to put out another post soon to try and rattle some cages, rile some people up, get people to think that they can have a disagreement so that they can come and talk about it. We'll see. Do I actually say Colleen Stark to come on? I can't remember if I did. I don't think... Well, she basically hasn't really disagreed with anything in the study, so there wouldn't really be much of a disagreement. Martin Rubak, it won't come on, although I've invited him again here. And of course, none of these other people have a coherent thing to say about this, so... Yeah, again, we've drawn out the best and most sophisticated criticisms of this study from people who are very motivated to try and disagree with it, to try and disprove and debunk it. And they're all pretty weak. So yeah, based on this randomized control trial, the plant-based meats that are tested here, again, across all categories tested, have much higher nutrient density scores than animal meat, and the bioavailability is improved for key nutrients, including B12. So yeah, this is a massive win for plant-based meat alternatives in terms of the health discourse on this topic. Again, I think the existing RCTs that we have showing improved health markers are going to be more important than this stuff about nutrient density and bioavailability. But it's nice to have a clear victory on that front as well, given how often that comes up from the pro-meat people. So there you go, there's that. And I don't think we're going to get anyone from that particular discourse to come on, but there you go. Right, let's have a look at the poll. Looking like Skyjack Morgan is taking it. So there's a 2-hour debate. It's got to be a decent shift here. And again, two things to bear in mind. I really want you guys to give me helpful feedback and tips here. Because as I said earlier, well, firstly, I've only done 7 different debates at this point. And secondly, I do not look at the chat during those debates. So you guys may have been saying useful stuff then, and I will have missed it. And then thirdly, I'm quite pleased with my debate performances overall, but I definitely know that there's areas where I can improve, and I want to do that. So, all right, without further ado, let's get into it.
Do a call-in show and stuff, and people, it's hard because it's still, we got 33.
We missed the first couple of minutes of niceness here, but I think we can skip that.
% of people like them, and they are really hardcore. So it's like a lot of these things. People have faith in these institutions, and it's really difficult to erode that faith in order to have any kind of meaningful change. And I guess that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, you and I, is faith in institutions and these
Carl, you really do see more when you're watching it a second time. Opening this talking about faith in institutions, that's really a different framing to what I have in my mind. Like I said at the time, this was kind of the least prepared I had been for a debate, and so I really hadn't done any looking into this guy's views at all. I'll say as well, we're starting the cut, lads. I've got a jawline max for a little while now. I was doing a bulk phase in the gym, and I'm quite pleased with the strength gains and stuff like that I've made, but we're starting the cut now. So we got the protein shake here. I got 2 apple cores over there that I've scoffed earlier, but we got a jawline max for a little while now. I've got a new camera coming, so I don't want to be picking up too many chins. All right,
ergs and stuff, and I'm not like a master debater, but I do like the Hegelian dialectic where we might come together with and maybe both grow out of a conversation for sure.
Nice, yeah. Well, neither, honestly. I think this is like the seventh or like about seventh debate that I've done on YouTube. So pretty, I haven't done a ton of this, but I do have some thoughts on welfareism and incrementalism. I guess that's the main framing for our discussion. Yeah.
Yes, because someone actually came out on my channel and was going, well, you got to reach out to Chris Bryant because he's talking about how you can actually someone who is an animal abuser could actually.
Now, one thing that has been said in people asking me about my debates and stuff, usually in advance, is that sometimes I guess usually there isn't necessarily a super tightly defined proposition that we're going to debate. More often it's like a collection of like 2 or 3 topics where we have some sort of disagreement, and then it's going to be just like exploring where those disagreements are. Which I think in many ways I can see how it makes it less specific, but in many ways can be a better framing for a conversation insofar as it allows it to be a bit varied and kind of exploring different angles on particular topics. But there may be some benefit in having like more tightly defined propositions as well.
Have a greater effect on animal welfare by donating money to one of our big orgs. And I don't know, is that the claim? Is that something that you adhere to?
There's certainly a claim, yeah. I think that there's a certain number of animals saved per dollar donated. Now that is quite good. Again, that's very good content brain from Skyjack Morgan. And not to say that this is like deceitful or whatever, but it's kind of going straight to what is going to be one of my spicier claims or framings, which is totally fair to do. And I guess that's where the interesting stuff is to talk about. But yeah, I do think that it's true that somebody who is not necessarily following a vegan diet but is doing this other stuff that I talk about is going to be saving a higher number of animals compared to the reverse, somebody who is following the vegan diet but is not doing the things that I talk about. I think I had a short a long time ago called something like how a meat eater could help more animals than a vegan or something like this. Bit of a... I can see how that framing is a little much for some people on first viewing. I think I do substantiate it, but yeah. So fair play, Skyjack Morgan's going straight to not an edge case, but like one of the spicier things that I talk about. And like I say, I'm like, this is not the main thing that I talk about, but yes, I do believe that. To in particular, effective animal charities. And honestly, it's pretty modest amount of money that you have to donate to get to being the same amount of animals that you don't eat by being vegan. Now, I'm also vegan, and I think people should do both, like donate as well as being vegan. But, you know, if you're counting out the animals, I do think it's true that somebody who's not a vegan could even be helping more animals than somebody that is if they're donating in the right places.
I guess, like, I would immediately ask, do you think that veganism is a tool by which to fight animal abuse? Do you think that I don't think that's effective at all to be vegan. Even I don't think that's the promise of veganism. Like, go vegan and you'll save animals. That's just a...
I was not expecting this. He comes on to say, "Oh, it's more about an expression of my values, and I don't want to be..." Which maybe this is the deontology versus utilitarian framing thing that we sometimes speak about, and InDef seems to educate me on each time. That I'm like, when he's saying this, in my mind, I'm like, why would you do it if you don't think it has any effect? Like, of course it's about helping animals, no? But for him, he's like, this is just an expression. Well, let's see what he says, but yeah.
A lie, I guess some...
Wait, is that, do you say what I think he said?
I don't think that's effective at all to be vegan. Even I don't think that's the promise of veganism. Like, go vegan and you'll save animals. That's just a lie. I guess some outreachers tell people in the street. It's not.
That seems mental. I mean, first of all, I think it's true. I don't think it is a lie. Look at my face here. I'm like, okay, plant a flag here. First of all, I guess as we see later in the debate, he is skeptical of the whole dynamics of supply and demand, basically, which I think is a pretty solid assumption that if there is demand for some product, that there will be supply for that, given that there's not other restrictions on that, like law or something like this, right? Like, it's a very fundamental skepticism about like quite a thing, which I guess I do take. I've got to stop my dog barking quickly. 1 second.
It's not true, right? Like,
should I play this on or? All right, just have to close the curtains so that you can't look out the window and get set off with the barking. Oh, I'll tell you what, that lighting looks a lot better with the curtain closed, hey? Yeah, that is not bad. All right, so let's see. Why would anyone think to be ethically vegan if not to bring about a better world for animals? Yeah, I thought this was wild. Choosing one of them to die, I thought it was a strong rebuttal to classical utilitarianism. Yeah, let's hear it.
In America, the overwhelming majority of money going to dairies, for example, 73% to 77% is paid for through tax subsidies and government contracts. So like me going vegan has zero effect on what goes on there.
I actually don't know enough to comment either way as to how true that is. But I have heard it said, I think it is correct, that the US subsidies to animal agriculture are not as big as a lot of people on our side seem to say. And as I go on saying this, I was somewhat surprised to find out the way that it works in Europe is not... Well, animal products get disproportionate subsidies because they use a disproportionate amount of land, and subsidies are just allocated based on the land. So if you have livestock that need, 10 or 100 times the area where the livestock are actually kept to grow their food, then you're kind of naturally going to benefit from the most subsidies because you're consuming the most agricultural output. But farm subsidies in the States, there certainly are issues around this to some extent, but I think I'm right in saying they're much smaller than agricultural subsidies in Europe. There's a thing about this in Bruce Friedrich's book where he talks about how it's like a fraction of the cost of animal products which are actually coming from subsidies, and how vegans tend to overestimate that a bit. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see how I interact with the subsidies thing, because like I said, I wasn't that confident to say this on either side.
Me going vegan saves 0 animals. So I guess like it's pretty easy to say like, okay, well, if I gave money to an organization, that would have a
I think that's where he's going, Doc Box.
Greater effect. But then you said that there's effective organizations. Which ones?
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, and the subsidy. So I was writing down a bunch of stuff that he said there. I realized that he asked me about effective organizations several times before I mentioned a couple, which probably is not good optics. But I've been writing down his points as he's going, and then he kind of ends on a direct question where I'm reading that he wants me to give a quick answer and then go on to talk about that. But I'm like, I want to interact with a bit of what you've just said, because there's like a few different things that I disagree with. So I don't know, like optically, what's the best way to interact with this, but yeah, there we go. These is certainly an issue. I think the way it works in Europe, at least, is that most, basically, subsidies are paid on farm area. I'll try not to repeat myself too much in doing the review area, and because livestock, hungry animals consume a lot of crops, that's the reason why they take up most land, basically, in their supply chain, essentially. I do still think that being vegan will result in fewer animals being farmed than not, even although that could be diluted to some extent by subsidies. I suppose the idea as well is that if everybody was vegan, there would be no point in subsidizing the industries. And I think even from the government's perspective, they're like, they would rather not have to be doing these subsidies, right? And it's kind of viewed as a food security thing, and if we're the only country not subsidizing the food system, then we're going to have more expensive food, and that's like a pretty quick way to lose elections, basically. I don't think I did reference, but I should have referenced Israel, Singapore, and the UAE as all countries which, well, I guess it's somewhat of a different point, but they do actually have like more pressing food security concerns and limited agricultural land. They do actually need to have considerations about food security and where the government's putting their resources in terms of funding, which I guess is the point. And they are, heavily invested in alternative proteins. Bit of a different point to what he's talking about here, I guess. So
subsidy and also just like the failure of giant corporations that are making far more money selling crops, cash crops. They call them cash crops because you can turn them into cash really quickly by selling them.
So this is a classic, like the subsidies is the first thing that I had written down. I probably got the notes here, in fact. Subsidies is the first thing that I had written down. I had like 3 other things that I wanted to address. But this is the thing about... maybe you're seeing a live case for why it's good to have a tighter debate proposal, right? Because then you can keep it a bit focused rather than just kind of spiraling off onto every topic that comes up in each like 5-minute volley of points. Anyway.
The animals are not people, right? So like all these corporations would fail. Even if we said no subsidy because whatever, the government's run short on cash or whatever, they're not going to let these corporations fail anywhere. If everyone just woke up tomorrow and went vegan, and it's kind of a pipe dream. We always talk about these things like in the future.
Well, that I think is, if everyone woke up tomorrow and went vegan, then yeah, there would be no need for like a mass like factory farms for animals, of course. And it's kind of like pointing to, I don't know if I managed to get back to this. Again, we're kind of spiraling off on the first thing. He's brought up about subsidies. I said something about subsidies. I wanted to address everything else, but now he's going to talk about subsidies, and now he's going to talk about something else, kind of a pipe dream, whatever he's going on to say. I won't say I wasn't told that he might talk a lot and kind of, I guess it's Gish Gallop, really. but with starting from the position of a little bit on different pages what we're meant to be talking about here, I think at some point I just like give up trying to write down all the different things that come up, and I was trying to go after a bit more of a sustained point. But yeah, just into like give my commentary on what was happening in my head at the time. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're going off on something else now.
Everyone's going to be vegan and we're not going to do this stuff. But that's like, veganism is 100 years old. It's coming up on 100 years.
I think you can be transparent with the debater and tell them your point is getting too long. You'd like to narrow and go point. Yeah, for sure, DocBox. And what's interesting is you have to make live judgments about the parts that you do actually want to contest. Because here I could be like, okay, there's a supply and demand thing that I disagree with. He's about to say veganism is 100 years old. We haven't made any progress. I disagree that we haven't made any progress. So there's that I could contend with. But I know then when it's going to be my turn to talk, I've kind of got to prioritize which of these things to go after. And that's a bit annoying because there's been more than one case in debates. Like you feel like you want to respond to everything, right? But you have to make decisions, and then you can end up letting things go past and you look like you didn't have any objection for them, but you're like, it was like one of my 5 objections and I knew I didn't have time to discuss all of them, so you end up having to let some things go the way you do actually have a disagreement and could talk about it further.
In what, 20 years?
But yeah, good. That's a fair point about like just saying, hold on, let's zoom in on this one thing. Yeah, that's exactly. So actually, let me add that to my list here. So this is on this theme, interrupt more time each person. What is it? Just like insist on resolving one narrow point. No gish galloping. Must be a double P in gish galloping. Oh, maybe not. Wrecked.
Leslie Cross will have been talking. We will have been reading Leslie.
Yeah, so true. DocBox also allow you to get concessions. Just to clarify, do you really think 0 animals are helped by someone going vegan? That is definitely. I should have said that. I definitely should have said that because that's probably my most substantial disagreement so far. I don't know why I started off talking about the subsidies thing, which I'm like not really that sure about, and it's unclear how much it matters anyway. But yeah, that's totally right. Just to clarify. Yeah, the thing about 0 animals helped by people going vegan, that's obviously the biggest disagreement that should be on the table, but now we're talking about 100 other things. Being explicit about the fact that you feel they brought up too much at once will help optically too. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, because he finished on a question which I didn't answer, and I'm going to come around to give an answer to it, but it's like number 6 on my list, and now we're off on something else. So,
cross for 100 years and about 20 more, and nothing's changed. Still, about 1% of the world is vegan. Nothing has actually changed. So, this idea that we're just going to like everyone's going to go vegan and we're going to
Annoyingly, I nod there as if I agree, but I don't. Just like nodding him onwards to, but I shouldn't nod if I don't agree with something.
Every vegan that we convert, that somehow that's going to save an animal. That's just I think that's a myth. It hasn't played out in the evidence. We're eating more animals than ever before. More animals are being slaughtered today.
So he said it again there. Probably I could have come in on, and he's making, I guess for the first time, something that he's going to bring up several times, which is we're eating more animals. Overall, the total number of animals slaughtered food has gone up, which is true, but is not evidence that veganism does nothing or that activism does nothing. Like, there's some rate of change in consumption of animal products, and the fact that consumption of animal products has increased over the last number of years is not evidence that there's no benefit at all from people being vegan or being activists. So yeah, I should have gone back to that. So the other thing here is acknowledge when too many points are brought up. Shows that you are keeping track and or not dodging. Because I did, annoying that I probably looked like I was dodging that question several times, which is not a particularly deep question, like which organizations do you think are effective? You guys all know that I have answers that I could give to that. It just feels like that's never going to be the first thing that I'm going to start on saying when I'm responding to like a big list of things, right? A lot of this is just going to be tactically which things to prioritize saying, basically. So, but I really appreciate the staple of science, yes, nodding is an acknowledgement, not necessarily agreement. True, that's a good tip. I really appreciate the feedback from Jax. Like I say, this is my first time rewatching these, and I also didn't read chat during the debate. Exports have also increased. Yeah, that's true. I guess we're talking about worldwide consumption or production overall.
Than they were 100 years ago. The problems have gotten worse, not better. And veganism is a word that we all know. There's more vegan options in the supermarkets. And yet, all those promises, I've been vegan, I don't know how long you've been vegan. I've been vegan 21 years, man. And from the very beginning, it was stuff like, I believed the lie when they said, one day we'll have plant burgers that taste identical. And they have the price parity and everything. And who would choose to kill an animal once you have that? Well, of course, I was foolish. I didn't realize that there'd be this propaganda machine against me and a propaganda machine against veganism and against liberty, I think.
Yeah, there's also a question of timelines here. And at one point, he says, oh, I've been vegan for 21 years and, you know, presumably nothing has changed in that time, or not enough has changed in that time. And he asked me, I said, I've only been vegan for 7 years. And he says, do you think good things have changed in that time? And I came up with a few things, which I was pleased with. But there's a broader question of timeline here. Like, first of all, we've only had factory farming like since post-World War II. So it's actually less than 100 years that we've been doing factory farming. And then for an even smaller fraction of that time, have we had the internet, for example? The ability to communicate in the ways that we have now. Only the last 10 years that we've had animal charity evaluators. So I do think that, and I did not do a good job of expressing this or anything, I do think that we're at a historically unique kind of juncture where there's a lot of factors that should make us optimistic that we can make progress now that would not have been possible 20, 30 years ago. I think there really is a unique confluence of things now which are like the internet, better alternative proteins than ever before, and ever improving. AI, I actually am quite optimistic about, and I think is going to be a good thing. And I will probably make a video about that soon. What else? Yeah, properly evaluated charities, which I again did a decent riff in this and talking about why that's important. So I'm pleased that I got to cover that. But yeah, I wish I had a better analogy for explaining why continuing to increase is not a sign that the brakes are not working, so to speak, or the advocacy is not working. I think I said something like, I could be getting fatter, but that's not an indication that some other diet wouldn't make me get even fatter. Like, that's kind of making the point I want to make, but there's got to be a tighter way of saying that. Like, it's like deploying your parachute and then going, well, I'm still going down. Maybe that's a better one. And it's like, in that context, obviously important that you've slowed the rate compared to not having the parachute. Now, you can extend the analogy further. Maybe there's problems with the parachute. Maybe the parachute could be built a little better than it is. Maybe there's fixes that we can do on the way down. But clearly it's better than the alternative rate of change. That would have been a better demonstration of why that way of thinking about it is not good. Like, you don't have a counterfactual, is the point that I'm trying to make. Consumption's still gone up, even though we've been doing some sort of activism. Like, presumably it would have gone up more if we weren't doing the activism, right?
So the promises that our, if you want to call it a movement, have made, they're they were bullshit. They're lies. And I don't see how even entertaining the idea that going vegan will save one animal is useful at all. And I think it's on.
Yeah, that's mental. This is mental. I can't believe I didn't say more about this at the time. That feels like definitely a missed opportunity.
True, you know.
Well, I was warned that you'd be good content, Sky, and you are not disappointing. All right, there's a few things here. Well, actually, first, just let me ask, like, what is the point of being vegan? Okay, nice. I did ask kind of a version of this. It was... So, I guess I'm not actually questioning that his statement that it doesn't save any animals. I'm just saying, what is the point if you think that is the case, which is a bit of a different question, and that's where he's going to talk about character and stuff. I sure, as you just said, let's actually talk about the view that it doesn't help any particular animals, or any number of animals. Vegan if you don't think it has any impact on animals.
The point of being vegan is the same reason I don't beat my kids or beat my wife, right? I don't save abused children by not beating my children. I don't stop spousal abuse.
You save your children from abuse, right? You save some.
No, it's
you
just
don't stop
who
the
I
whole
am.
thing.
I don't save them from that because that's not a possibility. I would never have beaten my children. And so
that seemed like a little bit of trickery. I should have pressed on that further. Obviously, whether you're choosing or not to beat your children is impacting that number of children. Now, you're not going to end factory farming by one guy going vegan. There's still going to be animals being factory farmed. But if you're not contributing to demand for that, then yes, you are going to decrease it. You are going to save some number of them. So, like, it pretty maps on pretty perfectly to the child abuse thing. You're not going to end child abuse if you don't abuse your own children. But obviously, you will reduce it because you won't be abusing children. Like, no. But then he kind of says, well, I never would have done that anyway. Like, I feel like I was wrong-footed by that. Now, I'm gonna have this. I should have locked in on this point a bit more, to be honest, because I'm part of me is also like, well, I got 7 other points written down here, but this is the main thing. Fair play to me for asking about it. I could have done it in a tighter way. So I said, what is the point if you think that doesn't help any animals? Perhaps I should have stayed at the empirical level and said, what's the argument that it doesn't help any animals? But yeah. Might phrase that question a little different. Maybe what would motivate people to get vegan? Yeah, true. Or just, like, let's examine the claim that it doesn't help any animals, basically. Only cool parts of this debate, but near the end, ask him specifically what does he want people to do was more effective against his vague doomerism, fighting the specifics. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, also, that is me just, like sincerely trying to understand his view of what he is saying. So I guess that does look pretty good for the audience perspective, kind of demonstrating that. But I was hoping that he'd have some tangible things that he could tell me to do. But none of it seemed like, if I was to write a list of what Skyjack Morgan wants me to do, I still don't really know. You do sneak in a rejection of the active-passive distinction, even though I reject it. It should probably be acknowledged rather than swept in. Yes, true, and def. Yeah. Interesting that you reject the active-passive distinction. I guess I've been thinking about that a little bit. It seems like there is some distinction there worth making. I don't know. Logic behind that is if everyone applied that mindset, factory farming wouldn't exist, but it does exist, and everybody thinks like that, but I won't change my stance. Yeah, I mean, obviously you're affecting the numbers, but then he's going to go on to deny supply and demand kind of broadly, so some people don't think of reframing the harm as choosing a better world over worse one at all, as obvious as it seems to you and me. Yeah. How to pin him down one point to expand, though. Hard to understand a stream of consciousness. Yeah, very true. fair play to him. We're kind of cutting in on bits here, and he doesn't like get mad about that at all. So perhaps I should have been doing that more and earlier on. But yeah, this is where locking in on one point would have been helpful.
I'm not fighting the animal abuse. I'm sorry, the child abuse movement by abstaining from beating my own children. By not beating my wife, that's just an expression of who I am. I'm not fighting spousal abuse. If I want to fight spousal abuse, I'll volunteer at the battered woman shelter.
This is where I was like, okay, so he's kind of talking about activism then, and this is sounding like Vegan 2.0, to be fair. So part of me at this stage is like, maybe we're going to agree on a lot. Actually, if you want to actively fight against the thing, you have to do more than just opting out of it. But I don't know if that similarity was ever centered in the way that it might have been, I guess.
Shelter. If I want to fight spousal abuse, I'll be an advocate for women. I'll show up in court. I'll vote. You know, there's a ton of ways to do that, right? And we can argue about the efficacy of those things. But by not beating women, I do not save any women, right? I don't save my neighbor's beating a woman. By me not beating my wife, the neighbor's still beating his wife. I've not done anything. I've accomplished zero.
In a sense, I agree with that. And that is kind of what I talk about with what I call Vegan 2.0, which is going beyond just the abstaining from it and not doing it yourself to trying to interact with broader systems. And that would be like the volunteering at the women's shelter or whatever else. Like
activism.
To actually... activism, yeah. I've rebranded it there, so that's very, you know.
you're gonna run into some problems because the word is toxic. At the end of the day, a vegan is a conscientious.
Yeah, for sure.
A vegan is just a conscientious.
My goodness. Thank you, Anab. I'm such an idiot. All right. So I was just saying the reason that I don't say activism is because it sounds like it's going to be very high effort. And when you hear activism, I think we all think about like going and arguing with people on the street in a Saturday afternoon. And most people don't want to do that. I think that might be useful to some degree. But if I'm like, be an activist, do activism, become an activist, you're thinking of that quite high effort stuff that most people are not really willing to engage with. And we did a thing about this ages ago called Quiet Activism, which has the graph, there it is, that I sometimes bring up on this topic. This is of people saying how willing they'd be to partake in various forms of animal activism. And there's frontline activism, with 64% saying that they disagree, that they'd be willing to participate, and just 15% saying that they agree. Compared to charity activism, which is like giving money, and then we've got 31% disagree and 41% agree. Social activism, this like social media. So these are the main things that I talk about, and they're like the lowest bar to entry, the things that people might actually do. You know, one of the things I've written down my debate strategy notes as well is make slides. Because showing this at the start, I feel then I would have it fresh in my mind at least to say, well, remember, this is the things, right? But yeah, there's a lot going on to try and get through, I guess. Kind of shows hard mode, trying to rebrand vegan. Yeah, true. Pushback from vegans for people who recall from the word. Yeah, not wrong, DocBox. It's incredibly obvious that the goodness of not beating your wife can be explained in terms of a much better outcome for your wife, but people who reject the active pass. Yeah, for sure. Like, obviously that is better than not doing it, even if you're not ending spousal abuse, as he says.
Just objector to the horror show of animal exploitation, of slavery, of oppression. Now, so you might get into a conversation about intersectionalism or whatever, but at the end of the day, I'm against oppression. I'm a liberationist more than I'm a vegan. By practicing veganism, that's just, of course, why wouldn't I?
But then, yeah, I mean, I'm always thinking, okay, but then don't you assume or have in your worldview implied correctly that being vegan reduces the amount of oppression? Because if not, then what's the point?
How would you take me seriously if I came and I told you I was a feminist, but I also beat and raped women or did horrible things to women? You'd laugh in my face. But one of the suggestions you're making is, I think, respectfully, that you might be an animal abuser and call yourself someone who helps animals. You see, like, that would be incongruous to say that. Well,
there's also, I think, a distinction about like where the label lies or what the appropriate level of analysis is. Maybe something like this, like he's thinking of it in terms of, say, like labeling the belief haver or labeling the agent, I guess, let's say. And there's a few times where this comes up. He says, like, you'd say this is a good guy, and I'm like, well, that's not right. I wouldn't really, not necessarily. I wouldn't really think about it in terms of saying someone's a good guy or not. I'm just thinking about the impact of their actions. I think we all do good and bad things in various proportions and with various amounts of self-awareness. But I'm not usually not operating at a level where I'm trying to say, like, this is a fundamentally good or bad person. I'm sure I probably have said that about some of the meat industry lobbyists, because I do think they're knowingly doing pretty evil things and they should know better and they do know better. But generally, I'm not like, the point is to try and say that each individual is good or bad. It's like, what are the outcomes of their actions? So yeah, labels can be useful because they are kind of shorthand for what's likely to be the outcomes of your actions. Like being a vegan, to me, I'm like, okay, that means that they've opted out of doing the animal abuse that's entailed by animal farming, and like they're not supporting factory farms. So being a donor, right? I would straight away be like, okay, how much are they donating, right? Because this is going to be relevant to how much the scale of appreciation that I should give to this person. But yeah, it's very much like labeling the agent, which for me, I'm like, that's just not really how I think about it.
Well, this person who's an animal abuser gives money to XYZ organization, and I do want to circle back to that because I don't think there's any organizations that are helpful, but they, or effective, I should say, that they.
Second time bringing that out, so we'll circle around. Geez, I gotta go through this a bit faster. I gotta give fewer notes. Well, I guess I'm mainly just trying to learn from this. I'm not trying to fit in a load of debates today. So
that if I do that, then I'm actually a good guy or something. You'd laugh in my face if you.
Yeah, I'm a good guy. I'm a feminist. I'm a liberationist. It's like, what's the impact of the stuff that you're doing? Tell me about the stuff that you're doing. I'm not that concerned about the labels, especially when they can be kind of vague or mean different things to different people. I do like that vegan is generally quite specific.
If you said a feminist, I beat women, but I'm an animal welfareist, but I eat animals. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I see what you're saying. So that's an interesting framing. So I don't, and I know that a lot of people do think about it in terms of, am I being a good person or am I being a bad person? I think almost exclusively in terms of the consequences and the impacts. All right, Rebecca, you've piqued my interest. If you made a video like this, it could go viral in 1 minute about debating. All right, let's have a look.
Aaron Rodgers is historically, transcendentally, specially great. No, you know why? Because Aaron Rodgers is hot and Aaron Rodgers is cold. Are you kidding me? He is not consistently his.
I see. It is the same guy, isn't it? All right. Okay. Yeah. I like it.
Historically great, transcendentally great. He's above anybody who's playing this game on a human level right now. He's also the most overhyped quarterback in the history of pro football. That
is this something that this guy has done, or have they clipped? Okay, they've got them both in the same shot here. So how much is he involved in the clipping together of these things?
Is the most laughable statement you have ever made in the history of this show. Okay? So it's Aaron Bleepin Rodgers. He's Errant Rodgers. E-R-R-A-N-T Rodgers. Here's what you won't have an answer for. The play of the game and the play of the year and the play of this century. That was special. There was nothing special about this play. No. Yes.
Undisputed.
All right, that's cool. That's cool. Nice memes. They clip things together from different shows. Okay. Wasn't him as a fan. I see. On the world, so it's not. I wouldn't say Chris Bryant destroys Chris Bryant, that kind of thing. You're a good person, or you're a bad. Well, I mean, I might also say that, but it's kind of. I would consider it a separate thing. It would definitely be possible for somebody to be helping more women by interacting with charities in a particular way, like if that's borne out by data showing that you can help X number of women for Y amount of money or whatever.
But then the same guy goes home and beats his wife.
Well, certainly I would think that's bad, and I think that it's bad to be consuming animal products as well. Like, I do think they ought to be vegan as well. I do think it would still be able to be true that you are having a better effect on animals or women overall by, right, can you see what I mean? I'm talking about very much in terms of the effects on the outcomes as opposed to like the individual's own moral character or whatever. What do people think of that statement? I think that's him trying to push for win on this point about a non-vegan could help more animals if they were doing these things compared to a vegan not doing these things. Tries to analogize to the case of the person beating his wife and volunteering at the women's shelter or whatever. I obviously think that you shouldn't do the bad thing either. It's still possible to interact with the world in a way which is reducing the amount of bad thing, and that's kind of the frame that I have on it. It's like going for a reductio, which I think I just answered honestly. What do I actually think about this thing? And maybe was fortunate to be able to find the words to express that. It like seemingly quite reasonable here, in my view. Anyway, I don't know. Let me know in chat if you think I'm kirked.
I get the urge to put everything in a
Bill Clinton, bring up Bill Gates or MLK. Yeah, okay. That's a really good point. Yeah, there actually are people who maybe have objectionable things in their private life. I don't know if any I don't know like any really of the stories about these people that are being brought up. I know that Bill Gates got divorced. I know that Bill Clinton has. I'm not quite sure what I know about Bill Clinton. I don't want to say the wrong thing. MLK, someone said as well. So yeah, there's definitely going to be people who have done bad things in their own life, and yet their net impact overall is very positive. Feminist leaders at the time got slammed for defending him for relations with much younger, far faster. Okay. Had some sort of impropriety with an intern or something, right? I did not have relations with that woman. That's what that is. Feminist leaders at the time got slammed for defending him. Okay, but he was doing like good stuff for women broadly. Is that the point? That's a pretty good one to have on the hard drive, if so. So how would I summarize this? You can have a positive impact on an issue overall, even if doing harm on the same issue in your own personal life. And then we've got e.g. e.g. Bill Clinton. I'm going to put having an affair. I don't know if this was, I don't know how much this is. Well, Bill Clinton, I don't want to get sued by Bill Clinton, man. That would nuke the stream. Bill Clinton having some sort of impropriety, let's say. Impropriety with an intern, but also doing broadly good things for women. And I also don't really know the details of that, whatever policies it was. His political actions helped 100,000 women avoid such distress. Isn't it more important than hypocrisy if you're a feminist leader? Yeah, that's good enough. And someone has also Bill Gates as well. MLK. All right, let's not slander too many powerful people here. But okay, it is good to have examples though. Bill Clinton is the one where I have it clearest, but I'm definitely interested to hear about others. So, yes, the point is, it's like trivially possible to have a massive positive impact on some given issue, while also on a personal level doing some harm on exactly the same issue. Like, yeah, okay, there's obvious, yeah, green politician takes flight to wherever, right? Like, yeah, it's kind of obvious when you think about it.
A closed spreadsheet, like an effect. Are you an effective altruist? Because you kind of sound like an effective altruist. Oh Jesus! All right, so that's like that's the billionaire's way. That's how capitalism flourishes.
I feel quite confident in defending effective altruism in principle. A lot of people have their ideas about what effective altruism is or what it entails. I feel like it's quite defensible. I think the criticisms that I've seen of effective altruism are like they get this particular thing wrong. But in my mind, I'm like, well, that's like criticizing science because there was a wrong view on some particular issue. It's like, it's about the process. It's about the philosophy of saying we should try and maximize the good done for a limited amount of resources. And it's definitely possible to get that wrong in narrow cases as well. But that just means that you need more science or more effective altruism. But again, I think this kind of gets lost in the fray.
We put everyone on a spreadsheet, and everyone's worth X amount of money, and by the way, or X amount of widgets or whatever you want to call it, and then we put their suffering in another column, and we can count that somehow. We make some numbers up, and then we can plug it all into a spreadsheet. And if we apply this formula, then we can somehow lower this sum at the bottom of this column of my spreadsheet.
I know you're saying this sarcastically, but I'm like, that sounds base. Like, send me the spreadsheet.
Does it sound great? Yeah. I mean, it sounds great if everyone fits into a spreadsheet.
Good interjection. I mean, it's just giving the description. I'm like, I agree with everything that you're about to criticize. Did this a few times, talks about how money has done all this harm, but then also rolls his idea that rolls his eyes at the idea that money can help you achieve your goal. Yeah, that's so true, DocBox. I feel like I did point out eventually. I'm like, you seem to think the lobbyists on the other side can always get their way, but then why do you not think lobbying on our side would do some good then? Or donate, like within the McDonald's bit, I was like, he said something flippant about McDonald's. I said, well, they've been very successful, and he said, well, they have much higher budget, and I'm like, well, that means we need a much higher budget, no? So I don't know. There was a lot of. I feel like doomerism is probably fair, and it's just kind of like broadly aimed doomerism. Yeah.
If you look at everyone as dollars and cents, sure, this is why billionaires love effective altruism, because it puts everything into this type of everything.
Already, I'm like, this is just such an annoying criticism where it's people think that they're making some sort of point when they say things like, you're just treating everyone as dollars and cents. It's like, well, what is the point that's being made here? It's inherently wrong to try and put dollar values on valuable outcomes. Is that the idea? Because we do have to do that all the time when we're making political decisions, like decisions about what kind of healthcare to fund, right? I talk about qualities a little bit, where it's like you'd rather not have this disease than that disease. I can kind of understand the intuition where people think, it's just a bit gross, basically, if it's expressed in economic terms and you're talking about something quite grave, or like the people would say, oh, this is more important than money. Like, my granddad died of cancer, this is more important than money. It's like, yes, it is, but it's also a function of how we're allocating scarce health resources. So what are we to do with that? Like, it makes sense to look at these things in quantitative terms. I feel like sometimes people are kind of appealing to the idea that it's like offensive to put numbers on things that are too sensitive or something like this. Like, I don't know. It just seems obvious to me that if you can quantify and optimize, that's you should be doing, especially for things that we care about a lot, right?
Becomes an algorithm, but that's not.
It would suck if we couldn't put values on, like outcomes of factory farming, but we could perfectly put values on how much does a new PlayStation cost versus a new Xbox or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, we do this in sophisticated ways in all sorts of domains, but then we want to restrict it in like the most important domains. To me, that seems backwards. But yes, a lot of people sometimes have this intuition that it's just bad to be bringing money at all into the conversation about like more important things or something like that. I don't know.
That's not principle. That's not values. I have a value that women should be allowed to do whatever they want and shouldn't have to be oppressed by men.
See, when he's saying value, my read is that he's thinking of this in like very binary terms. When I hear value, I'm like, that's a number. There are trade-offs with how you achieve good things and avoid bad things. Often these trade-offs come into play, and it's useful to be able to compare, okay, how much do we value this cost versus this outcome, or vice versa, right?
Men. Maybe in my activism, I might want to start building some spreadsheets so that I can, since I only have a limited amount of time on and money on this earth and resources, exactly, I want to apply them. But that has really not much to do with my values and principles, right? That has to do with how can I effectively, assign my time. And we're going to have...
Yeah, that's a nice point in there. If I respond to this line by asking why companies use advertisements direct to individuals, follow up with asking whether the companies use numbers when they do so. Yeah, that's a good point. Now, we have a bunch of institutions that seem quite capable of maximizing the outcomes that they're interested in, and we hear a lot of criticisms for billionaires and big companies in this debate. But clearly they're effective at trying to maximize the outcomes that they are interested in, whether you think that's the wrong thing, which, we're broadly going to agree on that in most cases. So true, in depth. Avoiding numbers as an activist is like avoiding guns as an army. Saying things like victory is the goal, not just guns. That's so true. That's so true. And another analogy I brought up to this sort of similar line of criticism is about an address book, like my contact. Someone said, oh, you're just making spreadsheets and you think that you can put all these animals into a database instead of regarding them as individuals. I'm like, would you say the same thing about someone's phone book? I can't remember everyone I know's phone number, so I have an app where I put their phone numbers in. Does that mean I don't value them as individuals because they're an entry in a spreadsheet or a database now? Like, that doesn't follow. Don't just say base, but turn it around on him. I know it's hard to thread the needle of politeness and more assertive when there's a contradiction. Yeah, that's true. I am probably a bit too polite overall. He ignores that money and social pressure can influence values. Back to the idea that vegan does more than only impact your consumption. Rams has a marketing background. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Haven't done as much research as I need to for the David Rams convo, but I've got a couple of weeks to do that still. Yeah, this is really valuable input, guys. I feel like there's something else to be recorded here. Definitely being less polite is going to have to be something that happens. Yeah, avoiding numbers. Yeah. What's the kind of central thing there? It is important to quantify animals saved, suffering reduced, etc. this is not somehow offensive to the cause. And then we can have some examples here. Companies quantify their marketing as much as possible. And the ones that do this best are the most successful. I feel like there's a fundamental thing about numbers are not incompatible with moral issues. More people hurt is worse than fewer people hurt. Some forms of pain are more severe than others. Just because something is a moral issue doesn't mean that it cannot be quantified at all. Is that what I want to say there? Is there anything else kind of I'm missing from that insight?
Have some flaws and starts, and we're going to have some lies about that, and all sorts of things. We're going to have lots of experimentation when it comes to the efficacy of these things.
Oh yeah, also I'll put this under interrupt more, be less polite.
Things, but I feel like we've been doing this a long time in animal rights. Haven't moved the needle much. In fact, it's gone the wrong way. And effective altruists are trying to build better electric chairs for shrimp so that we can kill them more quickly and mitigate their suffering. Well, that seems like a misallocation of funds and attention if really we should just stop exploiting each other. Zoom out, have some values and principles that we might be able to agree on, which we claim to, by the way. We claim to agree on those values and principles. So let's just align our actions with our
be less British
values and be done with it.
Yeah, I think so. But I think there can be more or less efficient ways to instantiate one's values. Like the reason that billionaires, to the extent that's true, I suspect it probably is true to a large extent, billionaires like effective altruism because you can kind of put everything into a spreadsheet and into a formula and everything else. Like, you got to hand it to billionaires. They've been good at doing what they set out to do in terms of making a lot of money. Whatever else you might think, like they've been successful.
Because they're avaricious monsters, and we reward greed and greed and cupidity. I mean, this is something that we're you might disagree with the starting values of like I've done well to hold on to the thread there. If we wanted to go off on a whole tear about billionaires are baddies, like totally not the point that I'm trying to make here. I'm saying that quantifying things gets shit done. What gets measured gets done. That's what they say. Thing is, I'm going to try and get as much money as possible and fuck everything else I don't care about. Streamer guys approach, yeah, true. Why Elon's and planetary boundaries felt it was an important avenue, relatively. Yes. Was that for a particular... Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah. Modeling... Are you saying that in respect to quantifying things? Modeling dietary impacts, for example? I mean, yeah, that's so true. A lot of what I do is quantifying these things and making the spreadsheet, making the models. And so I feel like there's probably obvious examples that I just can't see any other kind of outcomes. Like, I would agree with you, that's like an objectionable thing. That said, clearly some people have been very successful at achieving that thing, and I think invariably billionaires and funders of the animal movement will be in tune and sensitive to things like what's the return on investment in a specific campaign. Like, we want to help as many, now we're shifting the objective here, we're going to never mind making as much money as possible, we're going to try and help animals as much as possible, and therefore we need new
spreadsheet, right? We need a new algorithm. We're going to put it together. And I think that to me is a very appealing way of approaching the whole thing, because we are, you and I there will still be animal suffering or exploitation, however you want to think about it, going on when you and I leave this world. Mm-hmm. But we can change the amount of it by interaction. There's another thing about getting to zero. And I think that diminishing returns on extra effort is a good model to have in one's mind here, because as I think I go on to say in this debate, like, we haven't eliminated murder. Like the world, or take any bad thing that everyone agrees is bad. For the most part, we haven't got to zero of any heinous crime. So I do think it's unrealistic to get to zero animals ever get killed by humans, because we haven't got zero humans ever get killed by humans, and even though everyone agrees it's bad. So we need to win the argument, and like in practical terms, that we will probably never completely eliminate the bad thing. And kind of all you're left with then is, I don't know how relevant that is here, but acting in more optimal ways. If we had the option for that amount to go to zero, that'd be great. And I think the only way we ever would get there is by trying to approach zero as efficiently as possible. But we don't have a big green vegan world now button. And in the absence of that, all we have is incrementalism and trying to do things as efficiently as possible and move things in the right.
And I don't know, because we've been doing that. We haven't always called it effective altruism, but we've always been doing that. We've been allocating funds through these organizations that just are another hierarchical shit show. And we place everything into this capitalist paradigm that just perpetuates the problem. It's
every time he talks, I'm like, there's like 100 different things I could go off on. Like, what's wrong with hierarchies, first of all? Is an organization bad just because it's hierarchical? Like, most organizations are going to have some sort of hierarchy going on. Capitalism, we're starting to get onto like broadly critiques of capitalism. I'm like, all right, well, we're talking about the system that we're in.
It's not that different from manumission and abolition. Like, manumission was the same idea. Like, oh, we're going to have softer whips for the slaves. We're going to pass laws that means you got to teach your slaves how to read. We're going to have laws that you can't.
Specific examples of money leading to good outcomes. Yeah, that's a good point. Have some specific examples of money. Oops. Into good outcomes. And then the other thing, he'll say something that I disagree with quite early on, but then he's got a lot of other like quite graphical things that demand attention and responding to. People did say to me, you have to keep this person on a leash, you're going to gish gallop a lot, but I don't know how successful I was in doing that.
Castrate your slaves anymore. And you might argue, well, didn't that do something great for slaves? They weren't castrating them anymore. But we still had to fight a bloody war to make.
Use the example of rape alarms on campuses in my video. Yeah, that sounds like a good example. Yeah, it's not going to perfectly stop the problem, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it as some sort of proactive step towards reducing the problem. Yeah. Might be crazy, but I feel like we need to advance surely towards being able to control the world to reduce wild animal suffering, especially in the sea, maybe. Yeah, that gets pretty difficult in my view. I'm not saying it's not a good long-term goal, but I don't know, I'm pretty locked on factory farming for now.
Slavery illegal, and did that solve racism? No, but race-based birthed into slavery has more or less ended.
Better saying, even if you could make a lot more, even if you could make some decent amount of progress on wild animal suffering, it still would be difficult to get to zero at the margin. But yeah, Dogbox says, I don't think it's necessarily that helpful to focus on diminishing returns. Be more yes and, which is a fair comment as well. In our countries, right? 1833, I think, for you guys, 1865 for us. Not that 30 years difference between the UK and America abolishing slavery, and it didn't happen just by
incrementally changing things. You had to have these sea change moments, and yes, blood.
Yeah, certainly yes. And there would have been more. Now, this is something where afterwards I said some of these cases that he's talking about surely were incremental to a decent extent. I don't know a lot about the history here of like what were the steps to slavery getting abolished, frankly. My impression is that there surely were incremental things that helped, but I guess I don't disagree that the big step was not that in terms of like the Civil War. But again, my history on that is very not strong, so there could be examples and counterexamples I don't know about. More and less effective ways to bring around those sea change movements as well. Like there would have been more and less like better or worse designed anti-slavery leaflets or whatever the thing was at the time, right? And I do think this is one thing that we can get into. I'm writing things down. There's a lot that we can kind of circle back to, I think. I do think that that would be like the equivalent of the welfarist measures, where now you have to teach your slaves to read, and you could say, well, fat lot of good that is, they're still slaves, like this is still abhorrent. And absolutely,
they also found loopholes. They found loopholes to not do it. They would do things.
Yeah, let's start addressing the first point, and then already it's like, we're going to play this one out.
Things like take slave children.
Damn, I should have held the floor there. I think I have like one out of maybe 4 or 5 of these places so far where I should be like not let myself get interrupted.
Drop them off on the side of the road, have them picked up by slave catchers, and then integrated into the same plantation so that they weren't slaves that were born there. And they did all sorts of weird loopholes to try to avoid these laws.
Yeah. I think that's similar with a lot of laws. Like, you know, if you do end up chasing, now I'm addressing the derail of the first point that like, yeah, need to keep the point clear and stay more locked on it. Loopholes like that to some extent. But I would say to the extent that that's to the extent that that is able to be enforced and observed, like it's not. I think this is the key thing. We can get on to talking about welfare measures. It's not just that now there's better conditions for those slaves because they know how to read, but actually it imposes an expense on having slaves now. Now you've got to fucking teach them to read. You've got to take time or pay someone to do that. And so it makes it less economically viable, which is a big part of how slavery came to an end, that it just like wasn't that economically viable anymore. A lot of it was to do with I believe a lot of it was to do with sugar beets being discovered, and now you could grow sugar that wasn't in it's like the little bit of nugget of knowledge that I have on this topic on the hard drive. But yeah, there's definitely a ton of history that I'm missing here, so I wasn't that confident in making these analogies.
There was stuff like that, but there was mostly it was workers' rebellions. It was people who saying, "Hey, you're hiring slaves to do a job that was ours, and we're not going to stand for it." There was a lot of that with the gold rush, and some other kind of land exploitation that they were trying to insert slavery into that. Like in California, it became.
Now, this seems like it would be something where it's useful to attempt to quantify the extent to which each of these things were having an impact. Like, the thing that I've heard about sugar beets, and that made it, I think it was like less viable to have shipping routes to the tropics or something like this. It's like something quite a pragmatic economic thing that happened with trading routes that made slavery less feasible. And he's talking about workers' unions and stuff. And again, I'm sure this also played a role. You could probably roughly quantify, or at least compare how much strain each of these things added to the overall system that led it to end. But yeah,
a big thing once they discovered gold. They tried to put slaves into California to dig the gold, and so that became obviously a conflict, and that was happening all over the world in the British Empire as well.
Do a Piers Morgan to interrupt and hold the floor if you're determined to stay British. Yeah, fair. That's maybe a character. I never thought I'd say this, but maybe I got a thing or two to learn from Piers.
But like all those laws,
that's interesting because it ends up being like very quite pragmatic economic arguments.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons why labor unions get labeled as racist or xenophobic, is because of these types of things. Like Cesar Chavez, who's now disgraced.
No, that was kind of interesting, but that wasn't really the point. I was looking to say, okay, there's another pragmatic economic factor.
Before that, he said all sorts of things about like slurs about Mexican immigrants and Filipino immigrants because he didn't like them, because he thought that the union was important and he didn't like foreigners coming in and taking the jobs and working for less money.
I see.
So you get like conflicts like that happen, and you're right, like it becomes pragmatic to do it. But the English Empire, they can't really maintain it, right? They couldn't maintain the slave. It becomes a kind of just a big burden, trying to enforce all these laws and creating another bureaucratic level on this stuff.
Exactly, and I think that's going to be similar for animal farming. They're currently considering in the UK banning cages for egg-laying hens. And now an anti-welfare is going to look at that very skeptically. Okay, the animals are still being exploited, and there's I had a conversation recently. Are they actually better off in cage-free systems? They're still in these like crowded barns. Now they have worse air quality because they're flapping around and rocking up dust or whatever.
Higher likelihood of combustion. They burn down all the time because they don't have.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's fair. But the point is, it makes it more expensive and more difficult to maintain, and it makes it more competitive for plant-based alternatives. Like tofu manufacturers are loving that law, right? Like eggs just got more expensive now.
Eggs get more expensive, but then they just become more subsidized, or that becomes a political talking point, or they pass the cost on to the consumer, and the consumer is brainwashed and advertised towards so that tofu is nasty and eggs are delicious. That's how they look at it.
All of that stuff can happen and does happen to some extent, but it's a constant battle like this, right? Like you have the propaganda against plant-based meat, for example, but plant-based meat is getting cheaper and beef's getting more expensive, so that's gonna and if nothing else, they have to pay for that propaganda, so that's costing them money as well. Hopefully they do pass on the cost to consumers,
but they don't pay for the propaganda. They don't pay for that. They're part of checkoff programs. The U.S. The taxpayer, I'm paying for it.
Yeah,
well,
that's bad as well.
Pays for it.
I mean, that's just another structural and bad thing that we should be
exactly. But that's the system
against.
That you're supporting with EA. That's the system that's.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a bit of a leap there, right? And again, I'm kind of granting that the subsidies are going on to a good extent, and that the taxpayer is footing the bill for trying to increase demand. I'm a little bit skeptical how much that is the case, but I don't know that it's wrong. Like the beef checkoff program definitely exists and receives a good amount of public funding, if not entirely public funded. So there's, I have something missing there. But then now he's making this leap to say that's the system that you're supporting when you're talking about EA interventions, like giving to effective charities and stuff. Like, what? Hang on, I don't see how that follows. That's just a completely different topic to the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Let's hear it again.
They don't pay for that. They're part of checkoff programs. The U.S.
I think he sees me say that's a structural thing that we have to address, and he is assuming that I'm saying don't address any structural things, which is not what I'm saying. Structural and bad thing that we should be
exactly, but that's the system that you're supporting with EA. That's the system that the EA is underwriting. They're underwriting this billionaire class that is made rich, and
he's made some associations that billionaire donors would appreciate EA as a framework, which I think is broadly true, because they're going to tend to be business-minded, ROI-minded, quantifying type people if they've been successful in business. But then he's making a leap to saying, therefore, supporting EA is supporting billionaires, which I don't think there's any reason to think that. It's not like EA is not like... there's just no connection between EA and farming subsidies, right? Have I just completely lost it? Oh, has my camera frozen? Hopefully you guys can still hear me, and hopefully you can also see me, but my camera looks frozen on my own. Well, let me know if you can't hear me. I guess that's the main thing.
At the very top of this hierarchy.
Well, I don't think EA is supporting that. Like, there's probably EA organizations. Well, in fact, there are EA organizations that are focused on policy and are going to be like arguing against subsidies and like lobbying against subsidies and stuff like that. So that's part of what animal EA organizations will be focused on, is overturning those policies. So that, you know, like it would all be. I feel like everything can be subsumed into the EA philosophy, where like if there is some problem with some particular theory of change, like welfare doesn't work because even if it puts up costs, there's just subsidies and propaganda or whatever. Like that's just a new problem for EA to consider. It's not that EA doesn't work.
Well, why put so many stones on the pond just to cross it? We don't need to do that. We don't have to stepstone all the way like that. Like I see these.
What's the alternative though?
It's quite easy. I see cage-free egg campaigns against Crumble Cookie over here. It's like, well, just go egg-free campaign. If we have a limited amount of money, a limited amount of bodies to actually protest, we have a limited amount of time. Well, make them egg-free. Why are we even talking about cage-free? Why take that step at all? Because you're hoping that it's a lower bar to pass, but it isn't. You've spent all this time and money to try to get.
Nice, thank you guys. Yeah, I feel like I needed to be cutting in more at this point, because this kind of seems like rambling around the point now to me.
Swanson's animal products to go cage free, and they say, okay, we're going to do it in 5 years. Just shut up, and then they don't do it, and because it's not. They just don't want.
Many of them do it. The percentage of cage-free eggs has gone up massively, and again, like it's got to the point now where in the UK we're going to make this illegal, because 70% plus of our eggs are already coming from cage-free systems. There's not really that much of an industry to lobby against it. In fact, the industry is largely in favor of it, because they're like, we're already doing it. There's some people who are not doing it and they're undercutting us, so we're going to get on board with this. So they can be effective at achieving those ends.
If those are the ends, just to have cage free, I find it a little, lackluster. I'm not going to get jazzed.
There ends towards further ends as well. I would say that's clumsily phrased.
That's just kicking the can down the road. This is just like, I mean, sounds like we got
to get the can to the end of the road there.
It just sounds like Adolf Hitler saying, like, we got to get rid of those people, and we're going to have a golden age and 1,000-year Reich one of these days. Just trust me, we're getting there one of these days. Well, I'm tired of being told one of these days. They've been saying that forever. One of these days we're going to have a golden age. Donald Trump's doing the same. They always tell the same lie. One of these days we're going to have a golden age if we just do these little things and we get rid of those people. It just sounds like the same thing. We've been doing this for 100 years. We've been trying to work on animal welfare for 100 years, and yet nothing has happened. We're killing more animals.
I disagree. Certainly overall animal slaughter has gone up. That's largely because the developing world is consuming more animals than ever, and there are EA organizations working. Yeah, that's a good point. That probably is a contradiction. Hey, he says nothing has changed in 20 years, but also we don't have to stepstone or spend money. If you were looking for something that's changed in 20 years, presumably it would have been an incremental thing. Clearly, there is still animal farming going on. Oh, geez, my camera's frozen again. I don't know what's happening with that. Good thing we got the new camera coming soon. It looks like the last one is breaking just in time, I guess. So yeah, there are actually a few points in here where I thought, hang on a minute, he's just contradicted what he said before. Particularly to do with spending money. He seems to think that spending money to achieve bad things works, but spending money to achieve good things doesn't work, or something like that. All related to demorism fallacy, yeah. To fix that as well, right? One of the ACE charities focuses exclusively on China. There's a couple focusing in Latin America as well.
When does it start? When do they start?
And this is where we get into like, now you're blaming China, you're blaming less developed countries, like such a distraction and irrelevant point, basically.
Start making, they should be called eventual altruism. Eventual.
Taboos work better than self-monitored incremental behavior change. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think like Sky Talk made it a good back and forth. He replies concise. Sky Talk's more narrative and storytelling. The amount of time talking doesn't represent the quality or contents you both bring. Yeah, interesting view, Twisted Hippie. I hope that's true. He definitely did speak more. When I'm listening back to it, I'm like, this Chris Bryan guy's talking sense. But like, yeah, I guess of course I agree with my views because they're my views.
Altruism, because it's not effective, because nothing has been effective.
Well, no, I disagree. Look, like with the cage-free thing, with the cage-free thing, we can look at graph. We always look at this graph of the proportion of cage-free eggs going like this. By the way, the proportion of vegans is also increasing very, very gradually. I agree with you that should be much faster.
Why are you claiming that? Because is that a good thing that more cage-free birds? That's a good thing. That's the claim. But there's lots of controversy about whether or not they're actually more distressed. They're actually suffering more because pecking orders. There's no flyaway room. They don't have their own little space. They injure themselves more when they're in these cage.
Damn! Again, here I'm like we're going off on a completely different thing now. I'm like halfway through answering the first thing that he's brought up, and now we go off on a complete other tear. I definitely should have held my ground more on some of these points. Or just like not held my ground on the points. That's the wrong way of saying that. But just insisted on not being interrupted. Insisting, let me finish the thing that I'm saying, basically. Because he do be talking.
Cage-free facilities, like I've been to those cage-free facilities. I've been there. I've been to these concentration camps, and we're like, well, it's better than being in. I've been to the caged ones too. It's just a little cage versus a big cage, and there's lots of. If you go to those egg producers, they're claiming that the cage is better for the chicken. So like,
just have to politely demand room to reply. Yeah, that's my feeling watching this.
To say that, to chalk that up as a win for effective altruism.
They're claiming that is because it's cheaper, by the way, and they want to do it as cheaply as possible. We want them to do it as expensively as possible.
Well, that's ascribing motive, but at the end of the day, they don't care. The largest egg producing nation in the world does not give a shit, because at the end of the day,
they want to do it cheaply, right? The producers want to have lower costs. To be fair to Sky, when I do butt in, he's not like objecting to me doing that. So probably I should just realized earlier on, like, okay, we kind of are interrupting each other, and that's fine. But sometimes you don't have enough. You're making a point. This is the benefits of being able to say things concisely, I suppose. You can get it out, and then you don't have time to get thrown off.
They're subsidized, and they pass any cost to them off to the consumer. And if there's if they have
based in depth, I've got to check out some of your videos on stream sometime. I saw you mentioned a debate that you did with Has the Vegan. I also debated Has the Vegan a little while ago. So I'll be interested to check that out for sure. I don't think subsidies just undoes everything, like all other considerations. You're going to be subsidized to some extent. You have to lobby for more subsidies. Like making animal products more expensive is indeed a good thing. It's not just like 100% diluted by the fact that they're subsidized.
You say it's a good thing, and I think that's debatable. But is that the goal? Like, is the goal to make
an incremental goal? Yeah.
So the goal is to make it so only rich people can eat animals. So the only people.
Again, it's like this kind of class war framing. That again is something that I would say if I was a livestock lobbyist. But surely, if you think that the amount of animals eaten should be zero, and if to the extent that you think that's important, rather than some other thing about everyone should be able to afford the same food or something, surely you would think that this step would be in the positive direction. That would be a better situation than like everyone can eat them because they're really cheap to produce because you can do whatever the flip you want to animals.
But you haven't changed that at all. You could still do the same thing. You could still do whatever the blip you want to animals because the rich are doing it, and we'll all aspire to be like them. And so we'll just kill smaller animals, just like chickens.
If the reason that only rich people can afford animal products is because animal welfare standards are so high and it's so expensive to produce animals, then there are going to be far fewer animals farmed as well as a result of that. I missed the point. I was trying to reply to you can't do whatever the flip you want because it is actually regulated to some extent. And I kind of went off. I've gone off to another thing. I guess there's 2 points going on there. Class wars of war and is denying a side ammunition. Kind of true. What's wrong with ascribing motive when the motive is obvious? Yeah, that's also true. Again, it's like one of 100 things I could have disagreed with in that particular volley. You're ascribing motives like, yeah. They do want to do it more cheaply though, right? That's my model of what is going on here. We have to pretend we don't know the mugger wants money. Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, they're busy trying to build a better cow, slaughter them more efficiently, using less labor. There's always ways in a business to shore up those costs.
Also, I mean, that would be a fair objection if he was to say, no, okay, but I think you've got the motive wrong. If I said, well, they want to do it like this because it's the cheapest way to produce, I would only think that objecting to ascribing motive would be relevant if he thinks there's some other motive, like there's some alternative model that explains what they're doing better. But I don't think that there is. So yeah, again, it's like one of many things that wasn't the path to choose to go down, but yeah. Well,
there's
again,
always a way.
They'll be doing that regardless, though, right? Like whether or not there are animal people campaigning for cage-free, they're going to be trying to make. Yeah, but then, so check out my last couple of casts from Reasonable Vegan. Yeah, okay, I'll check that out enough.
So stop using them altogether. Like, why are we?
Well, I agree with you, but how do you do that? Like, the only way to do that is have the alternatives getting cheaper and better, have the animal products getting more expensive because there's now increased. This is like a bit of a central anti-welfarist stance that I was quite pleased to stumble upon, because it's just not incompatible to think we shouldn't be doing this at all, and to the extent that we are doing it, we should be doing it in a restricted way. Like, those things are super compatible. And I think like the anti-welfarist position thinks that my position is going to say, no, you can keep doing it. You don't have to stop doing it overall. Like, that's not my position. So I don't know if he was surprised by my then saying, I agree with that. It's not that we're saying, I think this is where like the cage-free framing maybe could be better. Because if you talk about being pro-cage-free, I can see how somebody would take that as you're allowed to consume eggs if they come from a cage-free system, or like we support these systems or something like that. It'd be better to be like anti-cages. And then that's something like ban cages. It seems like something that an anti-welfarist might be more likely to agree to than saying like support cage-free or something like that, which again is very narrow. Like I'm not really saying support that, narrowly support it as better over the alternative and like try to, right? But I think maybe the ban framing would be better in terms of animal movement cohesion on that point, rather than saying cage-free campaigns. Maybe we should say anti-cage campaigns, right? Kind of the same thing, but it makes it clearer that this is saying what not to do, saying what's not permissible, not saying what is permissible. Increasingly restrictive legislation and commitments and so on.
You're saying that's the only way. Doesn't make it so. That isn't the only way. There's a myriad ways to fight this scourge.
But how else do you do it?
Well, I mean, we could talk about all the different ways of activism, but at first I wanted to know which organizations you thought were actually effective, because I haven't heard of any that are effective in actually affecting change. But there's lots of ways to do this. I mean, the ALF was breaking out animals. DXE's rescuing animals. They're getting in the. I mean, there's all sorts of people that are doing pretty crazy stuff. That
I mean, I do think that stuff is admirable, but it's really not scalable. Like, if you have to have a person arrested and spend time in prison for every like 2 animals that you save from a farm, it's not.
Oh yeah, I don't think they should be standing around like chumps waiting to get arrested. But
Interesting, DocBox. We'll have to zoom in on some of that stuff more closely. I do want to make a video about welfarism. That's on my list of a few short videos to make at this point, so I'll do some more research for that. See if we can find some specific cases.
I think they should be wearing masks and burning down department stores like the ALF used to do. You know, like that actually. You don't need much. You don't need to do much. Burn down a couple of department stores for selling fur, and all of a sudden fur becomes less popular. You know, burn down a couple of buildings. Things change very rapidly. You want to make them.
Worryingly, this is like the most tangible prescription he's given in the conversation. The other stuff is a lot more vague, and he goes on to say that he doesn't actually think that people should be doing this, which, you know, good for TOC reasons, TOS reasons. But yeah, I don't think that this would be, as I say here, like if you need one person to get arrested and go to prison for every like 2 animals that you save, it's not going to be particularly scalable, right?
You want to make them spend a lot of money, make them buy more security guards, make them buy more, you know, there's all sorts of ways to do this. But by putting all this time and effort into lawyers to try to say, like, we're not only going to make sure that you give them bigger cages, but we're somehow going to just hope and pray that we're going to have the wherewithal and the political will that doesn't exist today to enforce those laws, because we have laws on the books right now. We have welfare laws right.
I will say this, that is not a bad point about increasing the security costs. Like, it is a pain for these facilities where they test on dogs if a load of people are like, we need to turn up and save these dogs, because obviously that makes them incur costs. Now that, you know, there's better outcomes from that as well, because it's publicized and people making connection with the dogs and stuff like that. But yeah, that is that's a fair benefit to mention. But on the whole, in terms of like what one individual should do to be most effective, I don't think it's going to be arson
right now that aren't being enforced.
Mm-hmm.
And the effective altruist is like, what we need is more
DXC needs money for lawyers. Yeah, so true.
Laws. We need more regulation on these industries. Well, we have regulations on those industries. They don't make any difference.
Yeah, a couple of country differences. I like my well, first of all, I'm unable to advocate for some of the things that you're talking about in my country. God love the First Amendment, right? But I'll end up on a list if I agree with you there.
I'm not saying people should do it. I'm saying
Sure,
there's other
sure.
ways. There's more than one way to strike at the unspeakable system of animal exploitation.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and so like we do in the UK certainly have laws around how animals need to be treated on farms, and you are right that like oftentimes they are not enforced, and it weirdly falls to local governments to enforce them, and they don't really have the resources to do it. Oftentimes they have one person who's like the animal welfare enforcement person, and they have no budget for actually sending them to places.
That's intentional.
Well, I think it's just not a priority, frankly, because people don't
There's
vote for it.
There's no political will, right?
Well, exactly. But that's going to be a function of people voting for it and people caring about it. That's like part of what I talk about as well, is getting people to. But it's not like laws are futile.
They're futile if they're paper tigers. If there's no one there to enforce them, their laws are futile. I mean, shit, in America, in California, we just got on the ballot to abolish slavery and of humans. And it didn't pass. So it's like we have the ballot initiatives, and we still don't do it.
Isn't that already abolished?
No, I mean, we could, there's a loophole in the 13th.
I'm like, my American history is lacking, but I don't think it's that lacking. He's talking about prison, like labor and prison systems.
The amendment saying if you're accused of a crime or a prisoner, then you're able to be sold as a slave, and like you're able to use as a slave as a part of your incarceration.
This is like the forced work in prisons stuff. Okay.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, DocBox. I think it'd be psychotic to vote against a ballot measure that helps welfare, but I'm not convinced devoting your time to those measures are necessarily effective. So, yes, I certainly agree it'd be bad to vote against that. And hopefully you agree with me, it should be bad to not vote for that. I think it'd be a tragedy if if a good chunk of the supporters in principle of those kind of measures, or not even supporters in principle, but like tend to support these kind of measures, if you could put a lot of people off bothering to vote for it because it's imperfect, like that's exactly what I'd be doing if I was a factory farm lobbyist, right? So I think it's a good thing to vote for them, in fact. And another thing I would say on this, I think anti-welfarists can be almost distracted by the imperfection of the higher welfare system as a thing to not impose some additional costs on the farming system. And I think one way of seeing that, and this is what I ought to ask an anti-welfarist, I guess, do you agree that there should be other legal requirements and restrictions on factory farms? For example, on labor rights, right? Like factory farms should have to pay their workers minimum wage. It's like, yeah, they should have to do that. They should have to observe some sort of environmental regulations where they can't just dump whatever their like waste or whatever. Yes, we probably agree with that. And then when we come to like, should they have to observe rules about the welfare of the animals? People somehow are like, maybe it depends on your philosophical outlook. It's like, well, why would we be like uncertain on this topic, but support regulations on other kind of restrictions on factory farms? So this is like the main thing that we care about, but because it's not going to be perfect, we're going to be like almost indifferent on, or not indifferent, but like what's the word I'm looking for? Ambivalent about regulations on it. Half my donations to ASAP because focus on habit changing young adults with above average intelligence, conscientiousness in line with my understanding of psychology. Yeah, that's a really good thing. That's a really good theory of change, honestly, in Def. ASAP is in persuading students at good colleges, basically, which, yeah, they're going to be at the stage of life where they can change a lot and change their career plans and be, you know, it's going to influence a lot of their future influence on the world. And yeah, we definitely do need that. Yeah, whatever works within reason at this point. I'm older than vegan, 15 years, something needs to happen. Yeah. I do think incrementalism is what we're stuck with. That could be our motto.
And also they can lend you out to, so a lot of slaughterhouses right now are actually, they employ convicts. They're on loan from the prison and they work all day and then they go back to prison. So they spend all day slitting throats or processing dead animals. Yeah, it's messed up. It's usually immigrants, people who are like, you know, you've heard about the Somali population in Minnesota, 17,000 of them. The reason why there's such a huge number of them up there is because of chicken slaughterhouses that they were being employed in. Like, they poor people and they use them as, you know, very cheap labor or slaves, you know, on loan from and ICE is doing the same thing right now. We're incarcerating people, again, immigrants, undocumented workers, whatever you want to call them. And we're loaning them out for $1 a day to agricultural concerns. So, like, California had it on the ballot to get rid of it, and it didn't pass. And not to go too much on that tangent.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Doc Box. There is a very appreciable difference in not being anti-welfarist. That's where my main beef is, I guess, if you could put it in those terms.
But if we can't get that passed.
True twisted hippie. This guy gets it.
How the hell? We haven't even made the argument about why animals shouldn't be slaughtered, why they shouldn't be bought and sold, why their liberty matters, why liberty matters at all. We've never even had a conversation about it. And
well, it depends what level we talk. I mean, presumably you and I have good conversations about that, but like at the
university, yeah. Sure. In university and philosophy classes and stuff, we talk, you know, we read John Stuart Mills or, you know, John Locke and stuff. Sure, we're talking about it. But the average, you know, the punter in the street, the groundlings, they're not talking about, we haven't even made the overture, but we're saying what we
Why did I accepted the groundlings without so much as a smirk? I know the ones you're talking about.
Need is more regulation.
Well, look, I think regulation is one part of the solution. I think that all of these things work in concert. You need to make animal products less and less appealing. And one way of doing that is by making them more expensive through regulation. That is going to make animal products more expensive. Everything else,
Chris, but that's all dreaming. Like what your claim was that.
Again, I'm starting to make the first point, and now it's interrupt. We're going to go off on something else. I definitely should have been. Just let me finish what I'm saying. More. Because if nothing else, it's going to make for a more interesting conversation, because then he can kind of have his pick of things to disagree from. Or maybe the opposite is kind of true as well. Maybe I should just be interrupting when there's something mentioned that I disagree with, and say, well, hang on, I disagree with that, this is wrong. But I'm like, let him lay out his whole thing, then take my pick of what to disagree with. But it doesn't really work if unless both people are doing that, he gets in a lot more disagreements because he'll just disagree with the first thing that I'm trying to say. Whereas I'll let him speak for like 5 minutes and then say, okay, which of those points should we go in on? But then as soon as I start, he's taking off on something else. So yeah, definitely needed to not just do that and not get interrupted. Or interrupt more. But like a combination thereof, I think. Let's actually know that in the in the doc here. Interrupt more time each person. So be less polite, yeah. Either interrupt each other as soon as there is a disagreement, or insist on both being able to finish the whole point. Don't just do this one way. I let them finish. Let myself get interrupted. There's a point where I insisted on holding the floor against Todd Thurman after I felt that he spoke for a long time. Sky at least speaks quite quickly and has a lot to say, but Todd Thurman's kind of meandering through like a 10-minute thing. There wasn't that much in there that I had to write down to respond to, but then he'll still want to interrupt my first disagreement. But in that case, I said, hold on, let's go do this in order. But yeah, I don't know which of these approaches is the best. Either interrupt as soon as there's a disagreement, or insist on both being able to finish the whole point. If you do this one way, it looks like you've said a lot more wrong stuff than the other person, basically. Because the audience have the experience of seeing him butt in and disagree with the first thing that I'm saying in every case, whereas I'm only getting a disagreement with one of the 10 things that he's just said. That's my feeling anyway.
Yes, it is, because they've gotten more expensive and they haven't changed. We're killing more animals, and we could say, well, that's because China's making more money and they're killing more pigs or whatever, or that's because more poor people have access to chicken carcasses.
Well,
but
overall, yeah, I mean, look,
it's not working is the point. Your claim was that
in the US, beef prices are an all-time high, and the beef herds are going down. Like, there's less cows being slaughtered for beef now because it's too expensive.
And there's more flesh on dairy cows that they're selling. Hamburgers are still popular.
Yeah, this was not a good reply to what I just said there. There are fewer animals being slaughtered for beef. I don't. He's now saying, "Oh yeah," and well, like he's kind of implying, I guess, oh, it's just being made up for by dairy cows, which are now being added to the. Like, I'm pretty sure we've always been slaughtering dairy cows and like for beef, right? I don't think they've just started doing this because the price of beef's up. So this was actually an irrelevant point to go off on, but
popular. It's not like people aren't. You're right. Whole pieces of steak or whatever in the supermarkets are crazy expensive right now, but
that's true, in depth. That's a good point. Don't like being anti-welfarist from a philosophy view. To me, abolition and liberation are welfarists. Lots and lots of welfare. Yeah, that's kind of true. That's kind of true. And anti-incrementalist, you could maybe call it. Anti-welfare measures, anyway, like, is the kind of view that I'm talking about. Bringing donations to organisations he agrees with would be helpful. He's framed it as purely welfare. Unless I misunderstood your position, you'd also support Veganuary and ASAP for 2.0. Yes, DocBox. And actually, that's another thing that I would probably do some research on. The most effective demand-side charities or interventions. Because a lot of the EA stuff is supply-side, and the anti-cage campaigns and stuff like this. And I know that some people are fundamentally skeptical of that. So, within the organizations doing the demand side stuff, some of them are going to be better than others. Some of them are going to have better messaging, better like choices of what media to use and stuff like that. That's actually mainly where my research has focused, not on particular charities, but on messaging. I think I talk a bit about this debate. Animal messaging is more effective than environmental messaging and stuff like that, for example. Hailing Temple Grandin get away with welfare labelists, and she clearly causes net negative change to welfare by advertising for the industry. I don't know enough about that in depth. both consequentialist, both about the well-being experienced by the moral patients. There's a fair distinction between doing nice versus stop, even both improve well-being. Yeah. Temple Grandin movie? No, I have not. Damn, maybe that's something I need to interact with. People saying that's relevant. Can keep watching that cringe. Maybe I'll save. Maybe I'll save myself.
That was always going the way of the dodo. They've always been positioning us more and more to eating dead dairy cows or dead dairy calves.
By the way, I've had debates like this in text, like in comment sections, and it's way easier to, when you're taking your time reading something, say, first of all, there's no interruption, of course. So if the person makes like 5 different points, you can actually respond to each of the 5 points without just getting derailed in a live convo. And then also there's no, like, you can see where they are not responding to your points or bring up additional things more easily. You can like track this or chart it. Like, you've brought up these 5 things, I've said those 5 things, you've contested like maybe 1 or 2 of them in your subsequent reply, but then you've also just brought up another 4 things. Like, it makes it a bit more, it makes it a bit easier to see, okay, there's just arguments being left all over the place here, and there's, you don't really get concessions that way, I think, is a fair comment. Do you know why I asked yourself to delete all of his videos like 7 years ago? I don't know about that, Rebecca. I think I had a video at the time that was like, I actually don't really know. I think he had a video at the time saying something about it, which was roughly, I'm rebranding to be a little bit less edgy, or to, maybe it was to do with monetization or getting banned or something like that. But yeah, that seems like a fine thing to do.
Because it's cheaper for them, because they need to keep that industry going, and it's highly subsidized.
So it's like happened. I think that's like always been the case. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a particularly new phenomenon, but in any case,
it's getting more like
beef getting more expensive is a good thing if you're a cow.
So we think, unless you're one of the cows that's alive right now. Not if you're a cow. If you're a cow that never existed, so maybe fewer cows.
If you're an expected future cow, yeah.
If you have a
1% less chance of coming into existence, something like that. Yeah. If you're a statistical cow,
you were before your birth, and maybe you're lucky that you're not going to be on that side of the social construct.
But I mean, to be fair, those are always the animals that we're talking about with vegan activism. Like, if we could snap our fingers and get the vegan world tomorrow, true, good point, well made. So, if I do say so myself, like the current, I feel like animals that exist right now are kind of a write-off.
But what you're saying is that what I should do is, as prices are going up and all this is happening and I'm getting skinned on all sides and they're taking my money, I should take my money and give it to the right people. First of all, I need to find out who those right people are. I don't know who those people are. We have no evidence that there's any effective altruists or effective organizations. We have no evidence that any of these things are working, but you want me to, while I'm getting skinned, take my hard-earned money.
I decided at some point I'm going to let some facial expressions do some lifting here. I'm giving a little look as if to signify that I disagree with this, but I'm not going to do my face when
these things are working. But you want me to, while I'm getting skinned, take my hard-earned money that I trade my time for to this tyrannical form of just wage slaving my way through.
We're also, again, there's like so much in each response. Now it's like, is it somehow bad that you have to work for money? Like, there's a whole big thing that you could go down. And I feel like kind of this is all interlinked in a way that is tending towards an unhelpful model of the world in terms of like understanding how to interact with things to actually affect change. It's like money's bad and capitalism's bad and billionaires are bad and having to work for money is bad. It's like, oh, fucking hell, all right. Well, there's like a whole other world implied going on here that I just don't know. Like, supply and demand doesn't exist. Like, I just don't know how to interact with this like model of the world, I guess. So we're all selling our time. Like,
and I need to give it to some other guy to make it to make.
I also don't think that's about, like, we're all selling our time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, yeah, you have to do something with your time which someone else finds valuable in exchange for some value, like, right?
Get better for animals. You don't think that proposition's a little ridiculous when there's no evidence that works?
Well, I disagree that there's no evidence that works. I think we're all like we're all playing that game to some extent. We're all selling our time, and like to exist, and I think that's fine. Like that's kind of how it has to be. We can, like, I don't want to get into a whole tangent about that, but we're all selling our time to exist, and like clearly there are some causes where you could get, even if you disagree that the currently recommended ones are effective, we get on to talking about that. Clearly there would be some places where you could put your money that would reduce the number of animals going into the farming system, right? Very true, DocBox. That is a good and novel point. You have the habit of hedging and caveating, whereas he just confidently asserts things. Hard in debate to make a point when he can just yap, but we covered that already. Yeah. Be in a similar... I'll have a think about how to say this more precisely or helpfully, but be in a similar mode with respect to hedging / asserting. Yeah, that's very true. Several times I've been like giving disclaimers and caveats. I do kind of want to be doing that to some extent, I think. I'm actually dependent in terms of extent of caveating / disclaimers. Otherwise one appears more confident, and again, like there's so much stuff that he is saying confidently, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's wrong, and if we were to go down that line, I think I could show it in some cases, or like we could find some evidence of that, but because there's so much. But then yeah, you're right, I'm kind of caveating too much when he's just saying stuff. They have to change the way you talk just one more time to make your point of false concessions. Yeah, maybe. It strikes me it probably is good to be seen to be caveat. I think it makes it look like you're speaking more precisely. To me, watching this is obvious. I don't know. It's impossible for me to be objective about this conversation, but it seems obvious that this guy is doing exactly that, just like saying things, in many cases. But yeah. Same issue with the real doctor or researcher versus me influencer, yeah. Get Chip to moderator for round 2, yeah, maybe. That could be a shout, Twisted Hippie.
You tell me. I don't see it. We have more animals. We've been doing this for 100 years.
Also, the fact that there's more animals now is true largely. Now, again, I think it's largely driven by developing countries. Like meat consumption in the UK is going down. I
mean, it's always convenient to blame the global South or the the politically. Damn, now that I'm watching it back, is actually every time I'm talking, he'll just latch onto the first thing and go off on a whole other thing about, oh, you're blaming the global South. It's like, fuck me. Okay, that's such a, by the way, of what I said was in parentheses on my way to replying to one of the other things that you've just said. But now we're talking about, oh, it was the power dynamics of blaming the global South. Like, this isn't really that relevant to what we're actually trying to talk about here. Vulnerable.
I mean, it's just a statement of fact that meat consumption is going
with
down
your accent. I enjoy it particularly.
Yeah, all right.
That's all those poor people fault in the Mr. Gandhi.
All right, walked into that one.
Just a joke.
No,
but
Static was blamed. Yeah, I think I said this. I'm like, there's really no normative component to this statement. It's just meat consumption is higher there than here. Like, I don't know what else to say about that. That's just, you need to be able to talk about these things clearly, without having it become a whole other thing. Yeah, but this was like a complete distraction. God knows what I was on my way to. I was on my way to making the point that overall consumption continuing to rise is not evidence that the stuff that we're doing to mitigate consumption is ineffective, because you don't know if consumption might have gone more up, even more otherwise, if we weren't doing this stuff. And I suppose the thing about developing countries is just that that's kind of the default direction of travel, because people are coming out of food poverty and more people are able to afford more meat. So that's what's driving it. That's not a reflection on like, we've done such terrible vegan advocacy that actually more people in China are eating meat now. It's like, no, that's not. But we're just completely distracted now on like, are we blaming developing countries? Like,
it is convenient to always be. It's like with people with climate change. They blame the third world.
Probably if you insist on the standard earlier on as well and stick to it, the other person kind of learns. Okay, we need to either not interrupt or expect to be interrupted. Like I don't think it'd be productive. We're both just interrupting each other at the first opportunity. So probably should have just said, let's not do that.
Blame the developing country. Why should we? Like, we're doing all these things with wind turbines.
Yeah, look, it's not about blaming. It's not my fault and it's not your fault. Whatever happens here, right? We're both vegans, so we're not contributing to this in any case. But it's just
a conscientious observer.
Exactly right. It's just a statement of fact that meat consumption in the UK is going down. Meat consumption in China is going up. Like that. I'm not saying therefore Chinese people are bad or something like that. Like it's just that's just the reality.
No, but what's funny about it might be the reality, but the same culprits are at work. You think like the way that's happening, if we develop their taste for pork, we're the ones that did this. It's just like it's just like, you know, Keir Starmer getting on TV and saying the Iranians they're stuck in the Stone Ages and they're, well, whose fault is that, right?
Yeah, this is definitely bollocks. Like, why? Now, this is not the main point, and again, I would be a little... this is not somewhere where I'd want to spend limited time in the conversation, but the claim is that there's increasing meat consumption in developing countries because developed countries have, like, tricked them into it so that they'll be addicted to our soy exports or something like this. Like, isn't it just obvious that meat's relatively expensive and resource-intensive to produce? Poorer people around the world can't afford as much of it, and when those people have more money, they can now afford more of it, so there's more produced. Like, this is so like, some of this conversation is so erratic. I'm like, is that a belief that he had on the hard drive that like Western nations are like tricking developing countries into eating more meat so that we can export more feed? Is that like part of some coherent worldview that he had, or has he just kind of like stumbled onto saying that because we've now brought up meat consumption around the world and it kind of fits with like his broader views about imperialism or something like this? Because that's an empirical claim at the end of the day, right? To me, it seems obvious that, yeah, like I say, animal products are relatively expensive. When people have more money, they can afford more of them, and we've seen massively increasing wealth in China, especially, and other parts of the developing world. And that is mainly what's driving increase in consumption. And in that context, consumption is likely to go up because that's a more potent force than whatever effective or ineffective animal advocacy or like vegan activism that we've been doing in the meantime. So that's the point that I'm trying to get to here, that yes, we are seeing an overall increase in consumption, but that is not evidence that vegan activism has been ineffective. But now we're off on a whole other thing about, are we blaming developing countries, and it's some sort of conspiracy to do with soy exports? Like, there's so much else being brought up here.
Right, like the Anglo, what they used to call it, the Anglo-Iranian oil companies and British Petroleum and American interests. We're the ones that drew those borders in the Gulf states. We caused that problem, and then we blame them for when.
True, the Western countries contributed to the increase by exporting brands like KFC and McDonald's, but also true the increasing wealth led to more animal products. Yeah, I would bet that the like exporting Western brands like KFC and McDonald's is doing a lot less than the increasing wealth of these countries, and now people can afford more. If anything, those companies would be looking at it like, hey, there's going to be increasing demand. There's going to be increased demand for animal products, and now like a new country where there's a feasible set of consumers, basically, and therefore we should go and try to interact with that. They're not like, let's go over there and get them all hooked on KFC. I mean, they're not like that. But the demand needs to precede the supply in that case. Like, it's not just, consumer demand is in fact a thing, and if people have more money, they can buy more of your stuff, is in fact a thing. And if you're a business, yeah, that's what you're looking at. So I think that's like, this is a good example. Someone told me the other day. It's like saying that sicker, or people who go to the doctors tend to be sicker than people who are not going to the doctors. It's like, well, that's true, but they're only going to the doctors because they're sick, right? I mean, it depends. Maybe. I mean, I don't know too much about that. It depends on the problem, right? Like, no doubt, both of our countries have our fair share of blame for like problems around the world. I'm not going to have any argument with that.
But why
I don't think we caused pork
not just
consumption in China.
We did. We absolutely did, because we want to sell them soy. We want to sell them wheat. We want to sell them our grain. And so we developed this. And I know. England, UK does it. UK's.
I don't think I actually said the thing about they have rising incomes here, which I needed to say, because that's my alternative explanation for the same data in this case.
More about moving the money around. But at the end of the day, the money from those industries come back to the United States, come back to London and New York. And that's the game that we've been playing for a very long time, that we push our taste onto other countries. We sell them the ways to do it, and we make a shitload of money, and we stay in power. I mean, this is how we've...
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about that. Look, my only point saying that, and what I didn't get to saying is that even if overall meat consumption is going up, which it is, it could go up by more or go up by less, like depending on what else we're doing. So if we're successfully passing laws, doing successful vegan activism, like moving things in the right direction, we can mean that meat consumption is going up less than it would be if we weren't doing those things, right?
I mean, again, there's no evidence of that, right? Meat consumption is going up, and we can wave it away and say, well, that's the third world that's doing this, or whatever we want to call it, the global south or developing nations. It's all their fault that this is happening, and we got nothing to do with that. We're passing laws here. We're the good guys. It's just like, it's like,
I'm not thinking about in those terms. I'm just like describing where this is how. I'm not like the UK is good because meat consumption is going down.
No, but you're using it as an excuse that I think is unfair. I'm not saying that you're demonizing them, although there might be a little bit.
I'm not at all. Look, even if meat consumption was going, let's say that meat consumption was going up in the UK. It's not, but let's say that it was. It would still be the case that this could be going up by even more, or it could be going up by less, depending on what we do. Like, you might, like, let's say that I'm putting on weight. Let's say that I'm getting fatter, right? Yeah. I'm getting fatter, like, whatever I'm doing with respect to my diet is not eating, and therefore, fuck it, I may as well just eat as many cheeseburgers as I want. Like, no, you'll get even fatter if you do that. So the rate of, you're trying to affect the rate of change, and the fact that you're going, like, things are going in the wrong direction currently is not evidence that, like, whatever I'm doing with respect to my diet is not having some positive impact on that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is like when America outlawed the importation of slaves, and there became an illegal slave trade. They made the slave trade illegal so that no more slaves would be imported from other countries. It didn't abolish slavery. It didn't help one slave. It didn't stop any slaves from being born. It didn't stop anyone from whipping their slaves. It didn't do anything. It just slowed down the bleeding, I guess. It just stopped.
But that's better than faster bleeding, isn't it?
I guess, but I don't think that that's a rallying cry. I mean, I think somebody has to be holding the flag and saying, no, we've got to.
There's a lot of insensitivity to scale then. I would be... I mean, depends on the situation, right? But slowing... I mean, I guess in any situation, slowing down the bleeding is going to be a good thing to do. And I think, for me, it always comes down to, it's as if the other person thinks you had the option to stop the bleeding entirely, but you just neglected to do that because you were satisfied with just slowing it down. It's like, well, you don't have that option. Slowing down the bleeding, like, to continue the analogy, yeah, if someone's bleeding to death and you can slow down the bleeding, that's probably a good thing to do. It's not, you're not going to be like, fuck that, the person's still bleeding. Like, come on. It's like insensitivity to the scale of the good or bad thing.
to have a direction we're going. If that's the goal, just to slow down the bleeding, that's not very
well, I will grant you that, like, the kind of stuff that I talk about is not particularly exciting. It's not particularly fun. It's not like paradigm shifting or convention busting or anything. I'm like, donate to these efficient organizations and post on social media and email company executives. Like, it's not that. Yeah, now we're into talking about how it's like, well, I guess that's good, but it's not very inspiring. I'm like, I'm not claiming that this is the most inspiring thing. I'm claiming it's like the best thing that we can do, given the circumstances. Now, I guess that you could kind of extend this line of argument to say something like, well, I think we read in a Sandcastle's blog where he says something like, it depends a lot on what your expected timeline is. If you have the view that, like, we might be like a year from ending animal agriculture overall, then yeah, you probably are going to look at someone who's like, oh, do these cage-free campaigns, and be like, come on, mate, do something a bit more ambitious. But if you have the view that this is a big beast and it's going to be a long fight, and there's a lot to be considered in that time, then yeah, you're going to take more kindly to what someone might regard as a small amount of progress. So yeah, I mean, I just don't think we have the, like I said earlier in the debate, I don't have the big green vegan world now button. I think that is what I often end up coming back to in these like anti-incrementalism kind of conversations. So you're assuming that there is some jump to the finish line that I'm just neglecting to do because I can't be bothered or something. Like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, that's not the case. It's not that fun or exciting or like out there or wacky or whatever, right?
But you're trying to inspire them, but you want to separate them from their money, and then you're promising them something that had the facts don't bear out. The facts don't. The evidence. There's zero evidence that effective altruism working. The welfareism is working. It's gotten worse.
Yeah, I disagree.
And okay, we could go play who's on first again and again. Oh, it's a third world or whatever.
This is where I think slides would have been helpful, because I had in my mind to bring up the Our World in Data thing and show progress that's been made there, show progress with the increasing share of plant-based products, like increasing the amount of vegans and stuff like this. There are things like evidence I could appeal to show there has been some progress made. I think I should have done it for the audience. At the time I was like, well, this guy is definitely just going to disregard or poo-poo whatever evidence I show. Like if I show the cage-free graph, I think that's a bloody impressive increase in the amount of time. But obviously he's just going to say, oh, and that's great, but cage-free, right, it's still bad, blah, 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 and go off on a whole thing about that. So, but I don't know, maybe that's kind of futile. I'm like thinking it's futile to show. I need to remember as well that the audience needs to see these things. So I regret not having had more examples. Well, I had them to bring up, I just didn't bring them up. Not like showing more examples when he repeatedly says there's no evidence of this doing anything good.
But we've been doing this for 100 years almost, and it's gotten worse. It's not gotten better. And we're just going to give it a new name and call it effective altruism. We're going to have more elaborate spreadsheets, and we're going to talk about suffering and Peter Singer and the rest. And it's like, great, but you're still trying to inspire an impoverished class of people to give you money, give somebody money. Again, like I don't know which organizations you're talking about.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because you said it a few times. So there are organizations like, here, that's good. He was definitely ready to keep on going, and I just cut in and said, okay, let's do it. And yeah, okay, he's brought this up like 5 times at this point, and I was thinking, okay, I've got to actually name a couple of organizations, because obviously if I don't do that, he's gonna say, oh, there are none, right? Like obviously I need to kind of show some examples of this. This would have been the time to show the graphs and evidence of some progress and stuff like this as well, consistently by different raters and at different. Night and Def, nice to see you again. Thank you for your input. I appreciate you as always. Take it easy. Points in time always considered amongst the most effective. Well, pardon me. One of those is the Humane League. What I recommend giving to is what are like the meta charities. So animal charity evaluators, for example, does what it says on the tin. They are doing the evaluation of the animal charities, and they'll have a fund that is given to those charities that are considered to be the most effective. The reason that I recommend giving to that is because it updates. It's like giving to the philosophy of put the funds wherever they're most efficiently reducing animal suffering. And so if a particular, like if there's some new evidence that, hey, we thought this thing was effective, but it turns out that that other thing is more effective, your donations will automatically be updated towards this other thing. Whereas if you're giving to a particular organization or a particular intervention, you're kind of tied to that. It becomes like insensitive to the change. But if you give to animal charity evaluators or to EA animal welfare funds, that is on ongoing assessment of what are the most effective things to reduce animal suffering. And therefore, it's always going to be reflecting of the best evidence that we have on that.
It's like the S&P 500. I can just give money to it, and over time, it'll just make my small investment to assuage my own misgivings about how we treat animals, and I can go and feel like a good person.
So I'm investing in S&P 500 is generally good investment advice, which yeah, it is. I'm not sure why that's quite like the thing that he's got triggered to analogize to by my saying updates. Like there's a weird place to go, but then there's also he's bringing this other stuff about the emotional impact on the person giving, which that is implying a whole other set of claims. Is he saying that it's bad if the person feels good about having given to this cause? Is he saying that that's all it achieves? If he's saying that that's all it achieves, then I disagree with that, and we could talk about the actual wins for animals that it does achieve. If he's saying that it's bad to feel good about this, I mean, that I just disagree with that. Like, you might go to some sort of like, oh, there's no real altruism, because if you feel good about giving, then you're just doing it for the warm glow kind of thing. But that's, again, that's a totally different effect. That's a totally different variable than actually the effect that it has on the victims. And if anything, that sounds like more like what he is saying is his motivation for being vegan. It's like just to assuage your own feelings about the situation. He doesn't think that it actually affects on the animals at all. So this is like a weird thing of why would you give to charity? All it's doing is assuaging your own guilt. It's like, aren't you saying that's the only thing being achieved by veganism? I think the point of veganism is to help animals or to avoid harming animals, reduce animal suffering. I think that veganism does achieve that to some extent, and that's the reason for doing it. And then I think that some other things achieve that to a greater extent. So we should be doing those other things. But he's saying, well, just the point of being veganism is just that I want to be the type of person who doesn't support oppression. Or like, okay, couldn't I then apply that same motive for giving to the charities? Again, I disagree that that's all that achieves, but like we're either going to be driven by our own motives or sense of what makes someone a good person or not. For me, again, it's about the outcomes, but yeah. So the S&P is pretty good advice, isn't it?
Well, it is, but except this isn't that, right? I'm making the comparison because this isn't the S&P 500. It's just a version of that because we like the S&P.
Yeah, true, DocBox. I got to have some good demand reducing charitable causes to be brought up. And actually, he says later, like, oh, I used to drive around for PETA. I used to drive around in the big truck showing videos of factory farms or whatever he said. I'm like, that's good. That sounds like a good thing.
S&P 500. We must be able to do that for animal welfare. And here I'm saying, no, you can't outsource this type of thing. You can't outsource all of this. Then why isn't it working? We've been outsourcing it for 100 years.
I disagree that it's not working. Well, look, animal charity values, and this is another claim that you can't outsource. You can't outsource. Why is there any reason to think that that's true? Can't outsource. It's only for your own, like emotional edification or whatever. It's only to feel better, let's say. Which I disagree with that as well. And then what else has he said? Like it's not inspiring enough. It's only started in 2016, I believe, and like the whole phenomenon of let's try to do effective altruism and like focus or claim of having made no progress, I feel, on what's the most effective ways of achieving the ends that we want in terms of altruistic ends. Is a relatively recent phenomenon. No, it's not.
That's just a new branding. That's not a phenomenon. We've been talking about animal welfareism for a very long time. Even the Vegetarian Society was talking about animal welfare.
I don't think that there's been a systematic method of saying, okay, let's evaluate which interventions work and which don't. Like, this is a pretty recent thing in the last decade or so to have had
got more sophisticated.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And even in 2005. You know, because that's the thing, man. I went to vegan in 2005 and we were already talking about this. Hey, if you give this many, if it's just a numbers game, if I give this many flyers out or leaflets, this many people will get them, and this percentage of this will actually hear it, and this percentage will. I mean, it's just the same argument that we've always been having. It's just more sophisticated spreadsheets and more money changing hands, which probably is the real motive here behind this. I mean,
I disagree with that. Look, people working in charities are taking a much lower salary than they could if they work in the private sector. I don't think people are like cynically driven by money on these things, really at all.
No, I don't think that. Okay, like, I mean, there are people who are mission driven. I worked for multiple animal organizations now.
Yeah, I would say that's all of them. I think the number of people working in animal charities who are like, hey, I'm going to do this because it's like this is going to be the highest earning career opportunity. I think that number is 0%.
No, but it becomes something like 0%. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people will. It's a collection of individuals at the end of the day. Everyone's got their own motivation. It's usually not to make a bunch of money, although there are a bunch of people making plenty of money at this. But
I disagree with that. So, anyone working at charity is leaving money on the table compared to what they could be doing with their career otherwise.
It's not true at all. I mean, we have giant organizations like Red Cross and St. Jude's, and there are plenty of organizations that are charity organizations that people at the top are making shitloads of money. You have to be able to attract them. You can't run these organizations.
Yeah, but if they were working in the private sector, they'd be making fuckloads of money, and everyone knows that's more than shitloads.
Charity organizations, yeah, fuckloads and shitloads are two different worlds.
By the way, this is true, and again, like, he's appealing to, you know, because there are some people high up in some charities that make a lot of money, that's somehow refuting that they could be making more money if they're in the private sector. Like, there will be a salary penalty for working in non-profits because lots of people like the feeling of working for a non-profit and like want to be, you know, feel like they're part of doing something good instead of just working in whatever random private sector thing. So as a result of that, there's more supply of labor at any given salary, and therefore there are lower salaries because there are more people willing to do the job at lower salaries because they value other aspects of the job. So it's kind of touched on a few points that he made, like there's some kind of problem with people feeling better for support for like contributing to charitable ends, and also the idea of like people getting paid is somehow bad. I mean, so much of this is just like kind of vague, like anti-money sentiment, which I feel is quite common in kind of critiques of the kind of things that I talk about with donating or whatever else. Like a lot of people have just like a central thing of like money is bad, or money, like if it involves money is somehow bad. I don't know. I'm getting really noticing this tendency more.
I guess no, it's not the case that they like. What happens is you end up having a different mindset when it's nonprofit, but that's not the same thing as saying we're not here to make money, or we're not here to make sure that we get our biggest piece of the pie, because we know that the pool of money is finite, and so each organization is pitted against one another in order to get their biggest piece of the pie, and they're in competition.
There's another point where I'm like, he's almost understanding what I'm saying here. Like, yes, there's a limited amount of resources going to non-profits. If we could increase that, that'd be good, wouldn't it? Hit the nail on the head, the whole thing's a smokescreen for money. Yeah. Show me a billionaire who got there through purely working with non-profits. Yeah, that's so true. I don't think he believed half of what he said. I hope not. it's interesting talking to someone who is like a public figure, I guess, or like regularly streams and talks about their views on a variety of topics, because presumably he's committed to quite a few broader views or like thematic, like view themes that he has to kind of be consistent with. But yeah, I mean, I just think there's an undue level of skepticism towards non-profits in general. I mean, I think I concede a little bit too much when I'm like, well, look, charities do need to make money or something, but that kind of, I hope that didn't make it seem as though I was like, yeah, you're basically right about this. Obviously, people working in charities are just going to be, on average, accepting a lower salary than for doing the same job in the private sector, because lots of people want to do that because they want to feel like it's in with the argument mode. Yeah, and again, we're still getting like interruptions to the first thing of everything that I say.
Petition. It just becomes another capitalistic endeavor where we're all at each other's throats, and Mercy for Animals talks shit on PETA, and PETA talks shit on DXE.
Well, look, I agree that the charities are in competition with each other for. By the way, we're coming up on the hour. I don't know if you have somewhere to be or like have a hard out or anything like that, but just want to put that on the radar. No, I agree that charities are in competition. You are right about some things there. Like, people think, oh, non-profit, that means they're not at all concerned with finance. Like, no, that's not true. They still have to pay salaries. They still have bills to pay. Like, they are going to be concerned with getting finance.
They got to put gas in the tank. They
got all that stuff. And then also that they are in competition for the same sources of funding, basically. And again, I think that's basically a good thing. But only in so far as there is some way of measuring how effective they are. Because let's say that there's some X amount of money that people, everyone altogether is going to be willing to give to animal charities, and these different animal charities are in competition for that finite amount of money. Now, until you have a system like effective altruism in place, where you have some systematic way of saying, okay, this is what we think is the best use of money to help animals per dollar. This is what we think is like the most effective organizations doing those interventions well. In the absence of some sort of system like that, it basically comes down to who has the better charity marketing departments. And that's not what you want at all, because you could easily have a non-profit where they're spinning their wheels for years or decades and not really getting anything done. But because they have people who are very compelling at selling the message to donors, they can keep the lights on, they can grow, they can employ more people. And it's interesting because this is different from a profit-making business. If you run a profit-making business and your business is not doing the thing that the business does very well, it's going to become I'm actually spitting quite fire. When I talk for longer than like 30 seconds in this debate, I'm actually making a lot of sense. Apparent quite quickly because you run out of money. The thing that you're doing is directly connected to the money that you have coming in. And so if you're not doing it well, you're going to run out of money coming in. In a charity, that's not really the case. The thing that you're trying to achieve is really completely separate from the money coming in, unless you have something like effective altruism. So again, you could have a very compelling marketing department and have loads of money coming in, but actually be helping zero animals, or actually be doing harm. Like there could be organizations that are actually doing more harm than good, but yet they have a very compelling marketing team, and so they're able to keep the lights on. But if you have something like effective altruism, which is trying to say, okay, we're going to reward financially the organizations that are doing the best interventions and doing them well, then it's completely game-changing, because now you move into a paradigm where everyone's incentivized to do the most effective interventions and to be most efficient in doing them.
It's still just an arbitrary... It's just a metric that you invented. It's just an arbitrary metric. You're going to try to measure suffering and then affect that suffering.
I disagree that it's arbitrary. Look, I hear what you're saying. It's a little bit different.
How do you measure the suffering of a chicken? How do you measure the suffering of a man? You can't.
Well, yeah, of course you can. So in health economics, you have... Right, I'm glad I got that good tear on talking about effective altruism, kind of uninterrupted. That'll be a clip. But now it's like completely jumped to a completely different point about, well, you can't, it's impossible to even measure the degree of suffering. It's like, okay, well, there's a different topic. We're talking about charity compensations and stuff like this. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there for now. We watched about half of this debate, and I think I've gleaned some interesting things. I mean, my main learnings really from this are to be a little bit more assertive and less polite. Either interrupt more or most likely insist on being able to finish. I think that's going to be the main thing. Don't just do that in a one-sided way, because then you kind of lose both sides if you let them finish but let yourself get interrupted. Insist on resolving one narrow point. Acknowledge too many points brought up. I think that's all useful. Then we've got some examples for specific things, like the quantifying thing and the personal / overall impact thing, which I think are both correct. And then also to kind of not overhedge, particularly when the other person's not doing it. So, I'm sure that some of you guys could have told me that straight up, but it's definitely instructive for me to watch through and see some of it. Hey, boss man, nice to see you. Unfortunately, I'm just leaving, so you're just missing me. But there we go. We'll leave it there. I might finish reviewing this another time. I probably will finish reviewing this another time. But we'll have some other content to do as well. I'll be quickly doing a Fast Action Network. I'm going to lose my streak here. And I will do some more of these. I don't let my points slide either. Because I know we've got the King and Poe waiting in the wings to take my crown on the Fast Action Network points. Here could be the opportunity if we don't pick it up. Still on 508 for now. We'll leave it. But thank you for watching, guys. I appreciate the input. This is some really useful feedback on my debating overall. And yeah, interrupting or finishing all points is something to be more consistent on and insist on within the conversation. And that's just a case of being more aware of what's going on and a little bit less polite. So that's what I've taken from this. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Yeah, King. Yeah, true, Poe. I appreciate you guys a lot for watching. And I will see you next stream. Take it easy. Cheers.